Here's what we're looking for. Here's the ultimate goal for why we're even here today is this girl could be alive or this girl could be dead. If this girl is alive, we'd like to find her.
There are people who commonly disappear unexplained for hours at a time. That couldn't be anything further from the truth in this case.
Did they ask him about the panties, the blood all over him?
When deviant sexual behavior is a motivator,
Of every place that we traveled on this property, the only room that you were nervous in is that room.
I've been somewhat nervous since you showed up, Dan.
all bets are off.
There's a legitimate freezer in the ground.
Somebody has a dream and they want to make it live.
Why is there air holes in there?
I don't think a person would fit in that.
There are people in this world who are patently evil, and if they're awake, they're planning a crime like this.
Nancy, hit that girl?
No.
You didn't take her somewhere?
No.
Do you know where she's at right now?
No.
Can you take me to her right now?
No.
Okay, I don't believe it.
I spent my career closing murder cases. But I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
Are you speeding?
My name is Major Matt Smithmeyer. I started with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office in January of 1994. I knew that I always wanted to work in Fulton County. I know the people and I know the area. I have a sense of pride in my community and what I can do to give back.
We're in a very small farming community of Metamora, Ohio. Everybody knows everybody else. It's at 11:30 at night, and Smithmeyer is fast asleep.
I was kind of wondering, like, who's knocking on my door at 11:30 at night?
He finds a crowd of people on the porch who are concerned about their dear friend, Sierra Joggin.
They started explaining that Sierra had gone missing, no one can find her, something's out of the ordinary. It's every parent's worst nightmare. My daughter had graduated with her, and I grew up with the family. It's personal at that point.
Smithmeyer is determined to help the Joggin family find their little girl.
When someone's reported missing, a lot of times you look into the history of the individual. Have they run away before? Is there problems with family, home life, drug issues? And when we're dealing with Sierra, that wasn't the case. There was some sense of urgency that something's going on and we need to get on top of this as fast as we can.
We were really worried. Everyone knew Sierra and knew this isn't something that she would just do.
She was a ball of energy. She was a force to be reckoned with, for sure. She was exciting, adventurous. She was one of those friends that would do anything with you.
Sierra Joggin is 20 years of age. She goes to college in Toledo, 40 miles away, and she's home for the summer.
She had plans in the fall to return to the University of Toledo for her senior year. She wanted to graduate, work in the business field, and she wanted a backpack.
Life was really good for her. She was in a good place. She was really happy.
Oh my God. Nuh-uh.
She's ready to begin her life. And now she's disappeared in a puff of smoke. Smithmeyer goes to see Sierra's mom, someone he has known all his life. The mother reports to Major Smithmeyer. The last person to see her was Josh Kolozinski, the daughter's boyfriend.
There they are. Future husband and wife. Let's have a little smoochie for the camera.
Josh and Sierra met, I believe, when they were probably around 12. They had already had a friendship, and it just turned into a relationship and blossomed from there. They were a good couple.
Sierra's mom told us Sierra had left home around 5 o'clock to go to her boyfriend's house on her bicycle.
It's 6 miles from her house to her boyfriend's house. That's a long ride on a bike. But she pedals off into the evening, and it's the last time her mother sees her.
Around 10:30, Josh called family. Have you seen Sierra? Did she make it home? No, she hasn't. We still thought she was with you. Then the concern started, and the family started searching the area to see if they could find her.
Sierra and I shared each other's locations on our iPhones, and you can always see where they're at. It tells you a town, a state, where they're at, how many miles away. And when her location said, location not found, my stomach sank, because for it to say nothing, that was a big red flag.
Maybe she was in an accident. Maybe she got hit by a car and the person took off and she's laying there hurt. We contacted all the local hospitals and nothing. We couldn't find her.
Searching for someone is a process of elimination. Once you begin to eliminate those things, you begin to focus on something more nefarious.
Toledo is one of the largest cities for sex trafficking. Instantly, my mind went to that. Someone took her. Someone is trafficking her.
Your mind just goes into 1,000 questions. All right, we have this. Where do we take this? What's our next step?
Smithmeyer immediately puts out a bolo to be on the lookout for this girl. She was last seen riding a bicycle, purple in color. She was riding this while wearing a pair of shorts and a halter top and sneakers and green socks.
During a missing person investigation, you always have to start with the person that they were last with. In this case, the boyfriend, Josh, was the last one to be seen with her.
So they talked to Josh. Well, tell me what happened. Well, she came over, got there about 5:30 or so. We hung out for about an hour alone, and then she left, and I told her I was going to follow her on my motorcycle to make sure she got home.
Josh had followed along with her for a few miles. We also had video Josh had taken on a cell phone. He was posting on Facebook and just teasing her and telling her, ride faster, come on. About halfway, they parted ways. She said she's fine. I'll ride home. You go back and finish doing what you were doing at home.
If you're going to go so far as to escort somebody, you'd go all the way. Seemed a little odd that he stopped because she said he didn't need to continue.
Josh had told her, call me when you get home. He never received a phone call. Josh was more than helpful, but he's a person of interest until we can prove otherwise.
So you consider the facts. The facts are, so far, she's riding away from Josh, her boyfriend, on her bicycle on County Road 6 at precisely 6:43 p.m. The timestamp on the video was 6:43 p.m. So she is alive Josh calls her home at 10:30, 3 hours and change later, and she's not there. What could have happened to her? What concerns Major Smithmeyer is this town is only 2 miles from the Michigan state line. It's only 50 miles from the Indiana state line. If she has been abducted for sex trafficking purposes, it's possible she's in another state by now. So he gathers all the help he can get and even contacts the FBI.
My name is Mark Evans. I'm a special agent with the FBI. Fulton County is a small rural county. This isn't something that many jurisdictions see on a regular basis. The Bureau, what we're able to offer is manpower. We can bring a lot of people in a short amount of time that can break things down, speed up the process, hopefully.
That night, we had officers in the area driving up and down the roads also, looking for any sign of an accident. Her bike, Sierra, what would explain why she's missing. Deputy Simon was in the area. While he was searching the area, he had come across something weird.
As I was driving, I had my alley lights on, my spotlights, just so I could see on the sides of the roads because it was dark. We were closing in on midnight at this point. 5 and 7, Roger. And it caught my eye, this broken cornstalk. Normally in August, September, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. In the middle of July, when they're still growing, that stalk is pretty healthy, that is sturdy, and it takes more than a deer to break a leaf off.
So he gets out his light and he walks toward that broken stalk.
As I looked over there, I didn't quite know exactly what I was looking at, and then I realized that it was a bike.
When Deputy Simon sees that purple bicycle, he knows he's standing at a crime scene. We have a purple bicycle, but we don't have the rider. Where could she be?
5 and 7, Roger.
57, Roger. We'll show you en route.
You can take 10 steps into a cornfield in July, and no one can see you. No one. You're just gone.
I hollered a few times to see if there was somebody out there and they were injured. I didn't get any response. I went back to the roadway. That's when I called. I said, I need help.
Deputy Simon advised that her bicycle that she was riding at the time was found. We didn't want any traffic, any persons coming or going from there. She was almost home, less than a quarter mile from home, when we found the bicycle in the cornfield. We had 2 groups of crime scene technicians that could gather, secure, log any evidence that we might find.
They search the area around the bicycle very thoroughly, and they find an orange screwdriver. They also discover 2 pairs of sunglasses. One pair is identified as belonging to Sierra Joggin. Who owns the other pair?
We also knew that Sierra was wearing bright green socks. We were able to find a singular bright green sock in the cornfield.
People do not walk around wearing only one sock. There's been a physical confrontation here.
I started seeing blood on the corn stalks.
We knew someone was hurt. We assumed that was Sierra.
It was at that time that we realized that the likelihood of Sierra leaving that area on her own free will wasn't possible. This was an abduction.
We were just shared the information that they had the bike and there was a crime scene. We didn't know to the extent of it. Was she hit by a car? Was she disoriented and walked away? Where could she be?
We also observed a spot where it looked like motorcycle tracks in the dirt.
Well, who says he was with Sierra for a period of distance on a motorcycle? her boyfriend, Josh. 2 and 2 still makes 4.
We need to talk to him and rule him in or out as a viable suspect.
So they make contact with Josh. He gives them permission to search anywhere they like. He says, I've got nothing to do with this.
We knew when somebody left that crime scene, they were bleeding. So we're looking for items that may contain blood. We also photographed his motorcycle, the tires on the motorcycle.
They look at his motorcycle. There's no blood on it. They look at the house, they find nothing, no blood. He also has a truck. Now he becomes interesting.
As we conducted the search of Josh's truck, we found the tan pair of overalls, and immediately we noticed that there was red staining on them, consistent with blood.
Blood in the coveralls? Can this be explained? He's become more of an interesting person than he was.
In our interview with Josh, we learned that their relationship wasn't having any issues. There were no problems. We also spoke with friends of Sierra.
They were asking us, how is Josh as a boyfriend? Have you ever seen him mean to her, hit her, anything like that? And Josh is a complete teddy bear. And so for them to think it was Josh, we just thought it was comical.
Once we discovered the overalls in the rear of Josh's truck, we, of course, asked him, what is this blood? He explained that he had recently been on a hunting trip.
State Crime Lab tested the blood on there and found it to be animal. That's not Sierra's blood, so we could rule that out. We also found the tire tracks didn't match the bike that he was on. We don't see any reason to believe that he's involved in this.
He wasn't there. He wasn't responsible for what happened.
It's now been over 24 hours since Sierra's been missing, and the amount of pressure being applied to law enforcement is growing by the moment. But there is still some level of hope that she could still be alive. We just don't know where she could be.
We immediately decided we needed to set up a command post so that information could flow in and flow out pretty fast. And the school district blessed us by opening up that school.
We were receiving phone calls, any tips that would come in and be investigated.
The police are reaching out from that command post, and the press picks up on their wide search, and they start driving the story.
Behind me, a large-scale search is about to begin for the missing young woman, Lt.Joe Kenda.
She was last seen at 6:45 at night. She was last seen riding a purple bicycle.
There was calls going out for people to help search the fields.
It was amazing to see your community come together and really boots to the ground. We definitely were trying to just keep it together.
Her purple bike was found on County Road 6, about 3 or 4 rows into that cornfield.
Where could she be? We were searching. We walked hand in hand, going back and forth with our feet, trying to see if we could find any sign of her.
The corn sits, you know, at that time was at eye level, maybe a little bit above my head. So it's up there.
It's almost like its own little jungle. You get even a few rows off a roadway and you can't see.
Deputy Smithmeyer and I and BCI agents were waiting on things to get been processed, kind of talking through what was going on. When Deputy Smithmeyer was advised that a resident had potentially found something,
this person advised that he and his son noticed a motorcycle helmet laying along the road. They got to look at the helmet, and it looked like it was covered in blood.
We know there was a motorcycle at the bicycle concealment site because of the tire track. Now we have a motorcycle helmet near the cornfield with blood all over it. What are the odds that this connects to the crime? They're very, very good. It's more than 24 hours that Sierra has been missing. And now Major Smithmeyer is meeting with a farmer who has found a motorcycle helmet on the side of the road.
When the helmet was picked up, it was getting dark out. He had his son jump out of the vehicle and grab it and throw it in the bed of the truck.
He doesn't think anything of it until the next day where he sees and hears that something had happened. Upon our initial view, it's now daylight. We can see blood on the helmet.
The evidence says there's been a physical assault and an abduction. We must learn more. We need to develop a suspect, someone to look at.
Was there someone that she was having issues with? Was there any problems with work, school, any of that? We didn't find anyone that maybe had a beef with her, so that led us to believe this was a stranger abduction, kidnapping, which leads us to be a little more concerned.
Stranger crimes are very difficult because there's no connection to the victim. Only 3 to 5% of homicides in the United States occur between perfect strangers. You're looking for someone who has assaulted people in the past. You need somebody with a criminal history. This is a sparsely populated area. However, there are a few houses. And one of the houses is less than a couple of miles from their cornfield, where they found the bike. So who lives in there? And what is his story? So they look and they find a person named James Worley. They discover that he served 3 years in prison for an attempted abduction of a 26-year-old female in 1990. Now they have somebody to play with. Let's go have a chat with him, see what he knows about a missing girl.
An agent and myself stopped at Mr. Worthy's residence.
Is this gonna be like a time-consuming thing? I don't know. Go ask me any questions.
We explained to him that we were going door to door. We were checking all the residences up and down County Road 6 where the abduction happened. Did anybody see anything?
If I was gonna attack a chick, and I've been around the block, would I leave any evidence whatsoever to be found?
You're saying you've killed before and you know not to leave evidence?
I'm just saying, sir, and that's not cool to say that. No, I haven't killed anyone.
We all kind of looked at each other like, well, that's weird.
You really can't pinpoint it, but when you know something's just not right with somebody, your spidey senses kick in.
He started describing how on the night of the 19th, he was riding his motorcycle.
I run wherever I go. I wasn't really paying attention, but I had started having trouble with the bike. I dropped at the cornfield because I just couldn't go any further. How far into the cornfield? Probably about 10 foot. I don't want anybody to see it, and I don't want anybody to see me.
When he said he saw a bike laying on the side of the road, that he wasn't a thief and that he had moved the bike.
And then he went on to tell us that he lost his helmet, his sunglasses.
I had a pack of fuses, my glasses, screwdriver. Remember what screwdriver that? Orange. Goes with this set right here.
We had to take the seat off to get to these tools to try to get his motorcycle started, and he lost all that.
And then you say you've got my helmet?
We have a black helmet.
Well, it's probably my helmet.
Okay.
Mr. Worley is an idiot, among his other issues. He doesn't grasp the fact that he puts himself at the crime scene. He thinks he's creating an alibi, and he's creating an arrest warrant with his name on it.
When we finally left the residence, we all kind of looked at each other and like, this is our guy. At that point, that I went and obtained a search warrant for the property to look for anything related to the abduction of Sierra.
They're looking for blood. They're looking for a hiding place where you could keep a human being against their will.
We still had hope that we would still find Sierra alive. The property was large. There was a house, there was a garage, and a barn on the property.
They go out to the barn.
He says, well, there's no need to go in there. There's nothing in there.
If I was going to have some little chamber or whatever, It wouldn't be someplace at my house where it could be found.
And at that moment, Smithmeyer knows that's exactly where they want to be, in that barn, because that's exactly where Worley doesn't want them to go.
I did not hurt anyone. I did not lay in the cornfield and wait and attack anyone. Honest God.
You never said it.
What is this place, and what goes on in there? If I was in that barn, I would be keeping my eyes on Mr. Worley, because he's at his most dangerous right now. He's about to be discovered.
This girl could be alive, or this girl could be dead. If this girl is alive, we'd like to find her.
They have no answer for that.
The search for Sierra continues, and Worley starts to really get upset. All he wants to do is get rid of these guys. When they focus on the barn, he wants them out.
I don't want to do it today because it's so hot, but go ahead and take your peek.
Once we got into the barn, it was kind of strange.
They notice that all the windows in the place, they're spray painted black. You can't see out, and more importantly, you can't see in.
We noticed where it looked like the ground, the dirt had been freshly raked. That didn't make sense. And then all these bales of hay sitting in the middle of the room, not towards the edge, kind of drew their attention as well.
What's in there? They start to move these bales of hay, and they discover a green crate. It's like an animal cage.
You're starting to get a little anxious, right? Like, what is this?
They open it, and it's filled with plastic bags that are labeled lace panties, bras, thongs, all ladies' underwear, lots of it.
So now we're really thinking, what is going on here? Why would someone have all this women's clothing?
One of the cops looks at him and says, "What are you doing with this stuff?"
Look. I gift out lingerie and stuff like that. Okay. What the is wrong with it?
Nothing's
You
wrong.
give it out?
Dude, that's all girlfriend stuff.
Do they ask him about the panties? The blood all over him?
We also found a pair of purple underwear that had a spot of blood. So now we were really concerned that we think Sarah was probably at this location.
Dude, that in there ain't her blood.
Mr. Worley was asked about those items what we found, and he claimed that was material that he was going to use while he was filming this new porn business that he wanted to start.
That back section of the barn is going to be turned into my own little studio. I'm going to have a porn thing. Okay?
Video.
And run it as a business.
So you're an amateur movie maker, Mr. Worley? He has become patently ridiculous, trying to explain away things he cannot explain.
Is that girl?
No.
You didn't take her somewhere?
No.
Do you know where she's at right now?
No.
Can you take me to her right now?
No.
Okay, I don't believe it.
Where is she? Right? Tell us where she is. Let us get answers for the family. If she's still alive, let us know.
What can I tell you then? So many crisscross questions here for me not to be just skeptical with you guys.
He remained defiant that he wasn't involved, he didn't do this.
We continue to remove more hay bales. Once we get all the hay bales outside, you can see a sheet of plywood over the ground that has holes poked in it.
They very carefully lift the plywood up, and what they discover under it is a trapdoor in the floor. They realize it's a chest freezer. It's big enough to hide a human being in.
It's buried, sitting inside the ground.
Why is there air holes in there?
I don't think a person would fit in there.
At this point, people are hearing what's going on and coming into the search area thinking this is where they're going to find Sierra.
They take a breath because they're afraid what they're going to find in there, and they open the freezer door. It smells very strongly like Clorox. Clorox will destroy blood and also destroy DNA.
The agent started asking him about, well, why is there a freezer buried in your barn?
Dude, that's my dope stash spot. I grow weed, I smoke weed, that's it.
That didn't make sense in that it was carpet lined and that the chemical smell that came out of there.
Your freezer's kind of odd.
Everything about that room is odd.
And it smells like leaf. Or ammonia. No, like something.
I bug sprayed. I sprayed that whole building down with bleach a week ago.
Why the hell would you do that?
To f***ing kill anything in that building.
Bleach doesn't kill bugs.
No, but it sterilizes and cleans.
Straw.
We searched all his vehicles that were on the property. We found zip ties, duct tape, a mask, pepper spray. One could look at them as potential abduction kits.
The freezer they find is a jail cell, a place to hide a human being, a place that will convince the human being to be terrified and to insist if they cooperate, they will come to no harm. Worley enjoys the sickness of that mental torture. He doesn't want to kill him, man. He's not done playing with him. This is the worst of humans, the absolute worst.
After the items that we found at that location, knowing that Mr. Worley was in the same area as Sierra at the time of her abduction, he was arrested and taken to our local jail on an abduction charge.
Now, Worley, when he goes to jail, invokes his right to remain silent. Okay, we invoke our right for you to remain under arrest.
We continued the search of the property for another day and a half after that. We had a missing person, and we didn't know where she was at, so we weren't going to stop.
I continue to ask the public for any assistance that you may be able to provide.
Of course, news media is out there. You know, they're asking questions. And we put it out. If anybody saw him, if anybody saw Sierra, let us know.
Anything out of place, anything out of the ordinary.
And it just so happened that this farmer, checking his property on the 22nd, day 3 since she went missing, and he walked up and, you know, noticed, hey, wait, that's not normal. That mound of dirt right there isn't normal.
They all respond. Ohio BCI, the FBI, and Smithmire. They discover a shallow grave. They smell the odor of decomposition, which you never forget. And they know what they've found.
Today's a very tragic day as there was a press conference held earlier this morning where the Sheriff's Department, along with the FBI, announced that they believe they have found the remains of 20-year-old Sierra Joggin.
The entire town and several different law enforcement agencies were focused on finding Sierra Joggin alive. And now they're standing over her grave.
Once we got most of the dirt removed and could expose her face, then we knew it was Sierra.
The worst possible crime scene you can ever have as a homicide detective is someone that you know.
It was emotional. Oh, it was hard.
And her family and her friends, we were all just on the porch, screaming in agony. It was like the last bit of hope that we had that was crushed.
Once they had dug down, they removed Sierra from there. It was at that time that we were able to see how she was bound.
Her hands were handcuffed behind her back so that her feet and hands were hog-tied together. There was a rubber dog toy that was tied into her mouth.
The plastic dog toy had been shoved in her mouth with such force that it chipped one of her teeth, blocking her larynx and causing her to suffocate.
All the evidence items that we had recovered were sent to BCI for DNA testing. One of the first things that came back was the motorcycle helmet. That motorcycle helmet had DNA on it. Of course, the interior of that helmet being from James Worley. The blood on the outside was Sierra Joggin. Those initial things put the two of them at the crime scene.
The blood at the scene on the cornfield was Sierra's. The spot of blood in the underwear matched Sierra's DNA.
The evidence they had against Mr. Worley is what prosecutors dream of. Without doubt, it is him and him alone.
Yeah, trying to figure out what happened, trying to understand how it went from her riding her bike to now her in a grave in the cornfield.
Worley never offered a word of explanation or an admission of any kind, but the police theorized as to what happened.
Doing the search on Mr. Worley's computer, he had watched a lot of porn on his computer that day prior to the abduction. And some of that porn was kidnapping, abduction kind of material. We believe once he watched that, he got himself worked up into a frenzy and went out for a ride on his motorcycle.
Police theorize that he passed Sierra on his motorcycle. He selected her as his victim. He then sped up, waited for her to come by, and might have even flagged her over. And he nails her in the head with a helmet.
At that point, he drags her into the cornfield where there's the struggle, abducts her at that location, ties her up, then leaves the scene on his motorcycle.
He then waited for darkness, which wasn't far off, drove back in his pickup truck, loaded her up, and took her to this chamber of horrors in a barn. Mr. Worley is evil to his core.
As far as the trial went, the prosecution, they did a fantastic job of telling the story, linking James Worley's DNA, building the best possible case.
The amount of evidence was overwhelming, but Mr. Worley was adamant that he wasn't involved. No remorse whatsoever.
Ultimately, at trial, James Worley was convicted of aggravated murder of Sierra Joggin and was sentenced to the death penalty.
He is scheduled to die in the Ohio State Penitentiary in 2025. My personal opinion, I think they should carry out the execution by shoving a plastic dog toy down his throat after they hit him in the head with a motorcycle helmet. But that's just an opinion.
After the trial, we were thinking about ways that we could help the community and provide life-saving tools for them.
So we created a self-defense and self-awareness curriculum called Sierra Strong.
We do community programs that provide self-awareness and self-defense classes for the youth and adults.
In addition to that, Sierra's family passed a law called Sierra's Law, which created a database of violent criminal offenders.
At the time of Sierra's disappearance, Mr. Worley's criminal past wouldn't have been public knowledge.
It was sickening to us that we had no idea this person lived in our community. And Sierra's family was really adamant about creating some kind of database that would protect the public and other people in their communities knowing where these violent offenders were.
We worked so hard for Sierra's Law to be able to have a violent offender database that police can use in those crucial moments when somebody goes missing.
We hope Sierra's Law will give law enforcement another avenue if something like this just happen in their areas.
She would not want anyone to remember her for what happened to her, but the amazing things that are happening because of her life. She's still fighting, and she's still pushing for change and positivity, even from heaven.
It is unusual for families to go to that length, but it's to be admired that they found something wrong with the system and they did something about it. In memory of their daughter, who lost her life to an animal, and her only crime was riding her bike down a dirt road in the middle of Ohio. On the next American Detective.
He's been beaten to death in the back of the head. There are pieces in here only the killer would know. How much worse will it be if we don't get who did this?
Do we have somebody roaming around the city killing people? What do we do if we're going to keep finding bodies?
Human beings are peculiar, fragile creatures. We pride ourselves on the complexity of our morality, yet we often reduce the value of a human life to a ledger sheet. I have stood over more dead bodies than I care to count, and if there is one thing I have learned in my years as a homicide investigator, it is that the most dangerous weapon in any room is not a gun or a knife. It is human greed. It has a way of turning a daughter into a predator and a home into a graveyard. You have to be kidding me, you might say, but in the case of Margaret Abernathy, that is exactly what happened. It is a tragedy that cut deeper than any blade. Let us walk through this piece by piece, because the devil is always in the details. On February 4th, 1991, in the small, quiet town of LaGrange, Georgia, Margaret Abernathy, a matriarch who was the very backbone of her family and a pillar of the local business community, was found in her home. Her daughter, Priscilla Matula, was the one who called 911, claiming she found her mother bleeding and unresponsive on the bathroom floor. When we arrived, the house was a scene of chaos, but to a seasoned investigator, chaos often speaks a very specific language. Everyone wants to believe in a stranger, a faceless phantom who breaks into a home and destroys everything. The scene was staged to look like a burglary gone wrong. There was a broken rear window and drawers pulled open, items tossed about. But here is where the logic fails. The glass shards were on the outside of the door, not the inside. That tells you immediately that the glass was broken from within the house, not by an intruder forcing their way in. Furthermore, the hole was so small that a grown human could never have climbed through it. It was a pathetic, amateur attempt to lead us toward a phantom burglar. It told me one thing. The killer was someone who belonged in that house. Someone who had the luxury of time to create a narrative that they thought would fool us. We had to look at the people closest to her. Initially, we looked at Diaka Andromelos, a young man living in the home. He was a soft-spoken individual who clearly adored Margaret. But in this line of work, we do not take emotions at face value. We track time. We checked his alibi, and it held up with the cold, hard precision of a clock. He was at a job interview. He was cleared. Then there was a son, Alec, who was drowning in debt and looking toward his inheritance like a man starving in a desert. He was a person of interest, certainly, but his timeline also stood up to scrutiny. Then, the truth began to bleed through the floorboards. We received an anonymous tip from a bank official. It turns out that 2 days prior to the murder, Margaret Abernathy had visited the bank, visibly distraught. She had discovered that her business accounts were hemorrhaging money, and she realized her own daughter, Priscilla, was the one behind the irregularities. Margaret had been a victim of a sophisticated check-kiting scheme. For those who do not know, that is the act of robbing Peter to pay Paul, writing bad checks to cover other bad checks, creating the illusion of a positive cash flow. Margaret was not just hurt, She was insulted. She had set her daughter up to succeed, and her daughter had treated her trust like a disposable commodity. Margaret was there to strip Priscilla of her authority, to cut the financial cord. This was the motive. It was not about a burglary. It was about survival for Priscilla. If Margaret made it to Monday morning to finalize those banking changes, Priscilla's life as she knew it, the dealership, the status, the financial safety net, would evaporate. The physical evidence told a brutal story. Margaret had been shot twice. The first shot was not instantly fatal. She had managed to crawl to the bathroom and was found with bloody tissue, an indication that she had tried to clean herself up to survive. Then, the second shot was delivered. This was a cold-blooded execution. Priscilla lied about her movements that day, claiming she was at work. Yet, we had witnesses placing her vehicle at her mother's home right around the time of the shooting. She even had the audacity to call a witness, Paige Hester, and try to coerce her into changing her story, to claim she wasn't there. It is a hallmark of a guilty mind. Try to fix the cracks in a foundation that is already crumbling. When the trial arrived in August 1992, the case was largely circumstantial, but the logic was absolute. A mother does not get murdered by a stranger who breaks into a house and conveniently ignores all the valuables while only shooting the person who was about to cut off their financial supply. Priscilla was found guilty and sentenced to life. I look at a case like this and I have to ask, what is the price of a soul? For Priscilla, it was a few $1,000s in a business she was already running into ground. I tell you, it is a bitter, hollow thing. A family was dismantled, a grandmother was lost, and a daughter traded her freedom for a handful of paper that could never buy back what she destroyed. That is the nature of greed. It blinds you until there is nothing left to see. Human beings are strange creatures. They can spend a lifetime playing the role of a saint, shouldering heavy burdens without a single word of complaint, only to one day snap and transform into something completely unrecognizable. They kill for the most trivial, senseless reasons imaginable. My. You look at the case of the Burns sisters in St. Petersburg, and you see a Greek tragedy built on good intentions, only to end in a crumbling, decaying nightmare. Let me break this down for you. Barbara Burns was a woman who sacrificed the best years of her life to care for her younger sister, Debbie. Debbie had suffered brain and neurological damage since she was 2 years old. For Barbara, Debbie was not just a sibling. She was her reason for waking up, her daily responsibility, her cross to bear, and her entire social life. Then, fate decided to play a cruel game. A sudden inheritance of $350,000 landed in their laps. To two women who had spent their entire lives living paycheck to paycheck, working minimum wage jobs just to keep the lights on, that money sounded like an infinite treasure. They lived in a fantasy. They traveled to California and Australia, living like royalty in their own minds. But dreams, my friend, have a very short expiration date when you have no idea how to manage your finances. Once the money ran out, the fantasy didn't just end. It turned into a horror movie. At 10:30 in the morning, a contracting crew arrived at a mobile home on Yellow Pine Drive. The property had been foreclosed on, and they were there to clean out the debris. They walked in and the air hit them, a thick, suffocating stench of decay. Never underestimate your senses. When you smell a decomposing body, you know in your gut. They found a home that looked frozen in time. There was a Christmas tree half undecorated, calendars still on the wall, and remnants of a life left behind. But the most chilling detail was the air. The house was littered with every kind of air freshener you could find at a hardware store. Cardboard trees, plug-ins, aerosol sprays, bowls of potpourri, and boxes of baking soda everywhere. It was a desperate, amateur attempt to mask the smell of a rotting human being. They spent the day clearing out 3/4 of the house, getting closer and closer to that final, shut bedroom door. When they finally entered, they found a mattress piled high with blankets. The worker tried to lift the sheets, but they were stuck to the mattress, peeling away like old Velcro. When they finally pulled the bundle off, The bag tore open. A human foot poked out. I have walked into more crime scenes than I care to remember, but the sheer coldness of living with a corpse for weeks, breathing the same air as the person you once claimed to love, is a special kind of madness. When we eventually tracked Barbara down to a convenience store in Virginia, she was working her shift, acting as if the world hadn't ended. I tell you, when I sat across from her in that interrogation room, I didn't see a monster. I saw a woman who had been ground down to a fine powder by 40 years of thankless duty. She told us how Debbie had become increasingly demanding, rude, and physically aggressive after the money changed their dynamic. Imagine the scene, a 4-decade, 24/7 codependent relationship. Barbara was the nurse, the mother, and the servant. One night, after a brutal fistfight over their dwindling finances, Barbara reached her breaking point. She didn't want to kill her. She just wanted the noise to stop. She went to the drawer, grabbed the gun she kept for protection, and in a moment of pure desperation, pulled the trigger. You have to be kidding me. She didn't call the police. She didn't call an ambulance. She just wrapped her sister in blankets and plastic, and she kept living there. She told me she didn't know what happened, that she couldn't remember. It's a defense mechanism, a way for the mind to protect itself from the reality of what it has done. When she eventually confessed, there was no grand conspiracy, no motive of greed. It was the explosive, tragic conclusion to a life of total self-sacrifice that had curdled into resentment. She told me, if she could do it all over again, she would never have shot her. I believe her. I think she loved her sister, but she was a prisoner in a life she didn't choose. When the state offered her a plea deal for 15 years, she took it. I've seen some things in my time, but this remains one of the most haunting cases in my career. It is the epitome of a good person who reached the end of their rope and did something truly horrific. Sometimes, life puts you in a vice, and the only way to get out is to break. And in that breaking, you destroy everything you ever held dear. It is a sad, cold truth about human nature. There are no winners here. Only survivors carrying the weight of a tragedy that should never have happened. That is the story as I see it. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when people are pushed to their absolute limits without help. Do you want me to analyze any other specific moments of the investigation? Or perhaps dive deeper into why the human mind chooses to deny such horrific actions? Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most pathetic, trivial reasons imaginable. A few dollars, a grudge over some home renovations, or perhaps just a sheer, cold-hearted desire to be free of someone who is no longer serving their purpose. You think you understand the difference between right and wrong, but I have sat in those cramped, windowless interrogation rooms, staring into the eyes of cold-blooded killers, and I can tell you that the darkness inside a person is far deeper than any abyss you have ever looked into. Let's go back to April 25th, 1991. In the town of High Point, North Carolina, life was simple. People left their doors unlocked. They felt safe. But on that spring morning, safety died on the side of Highway 68. Fred Brown, a man described by everyone as a truly nice guy, was found in a ditch. He was face down, having been silenced by 2 shots to the head and 1 to the back. You have to be kidding me. To snuff out a life like that, a man who served his country, a man who taught economics, a man who loved his children, over nothing. It is a tragedy that should have never happened. When we arrived at the scene, the details were chilling. There was a footprint on his back. That is not just murder, that is a statement. That is an executioner standing over a man who is begging for his life, pressing their boot into him, and pulling the trigger with cold, calculated precision. Most people, if they are robbing someone, shoot from a distance. They want the money and they want to leave. But this was personal. This was hatred. We looked at the wife, Patricia Brown. She was an Army wife, someone who had supposedly built a life of stability with Fred. But life, as I have learned, is often a mask. They had been married for 20 years. They had children. But behind the scenes, the portrait was cracking. Patricia had undergone heart surgery in 1990. And when she returned from recovering in Alabama, something had shifted in her mind. She became obsessed with exotic birds, 50 or 60 of them filling their home with noise, filth, and expense. Fred, the steady, reliable man, did his best to appease her. He hired housekeepers. He agreed to renovations. He tried to be the white knight she had once seen in him. But there's a point where a man's patience is exploited until it breaks. And for Fred, the breaking point was his own life. His friend and colleague, Ken Vaughn, told us something that still haunts me. Fred had come to him, his eyes heavy with the weight of his own demise, and said he suspected Patricia wanted him dead. He believed she would be better off if he were gone. When a man tells you that, you pay attention. You do not brush it off as marital squabbling. But Fred, trapped by his own religious convictions against divorce, felt he had no way out. He was a prisoner in his own home. The case went cold. For 3 years, we had nothing. No leads, no witness who saw the killer, just a shadow left on the side of the road. Then, out of the blue, a call comes in from Reading, Pennsylvania. A woman had found 2 envelopes left by her father, Leroy Wetzel. The instructions were simple: open only if I die. Inside was a confession that blew the case wide open. Leroy, a man with a rap sheet as long as my arm, had finally found a conscience, or perhaps he had just realized he wasn't going to get paid. Leroy was a man who stood 5 feet 3 inches tall, covered in tattoos. A man they called Short Circuit because of his volatile temper. He was the ex-husband of Patricia's sister, Sheila. And the story he told was a sickening tale of greed. Patricia had reached out to her sister, asking for someone to take care of her husband. She offered $30,000, money she expected to collect from a $250,000 life insurance policy. She had turned her own family into a syndicate of death. On that night in April, Leroy drove up to High Point. He brought a .22 caliber pistol. He called the Brown house and lured Fred out by pretending his car had broken down. Fred, being the kind soul he was, went out to help. He opened the hood of Leroy's car. He didn't see the gun. He didn't see the end coming. When Leroy pulled that weapon, he told Fred, "My wife wants you dead." Fred didn't fight. He ran. He turned and ran for his life, and Leroy shot him down like a dog in the street. When we finally arrested the sisters, Patricia didn't act surprised. She acted like she had been expecting us. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, where she died not long after. A pathetic end for a woman who thought she could trade a human life for a better lifestyle. You see, the motive was never about love or passion. It was about birds. It was about home renovations. It was about a debt that could only be settled with blood. It is a stark reminder that the people we sleep next to, the people we share our breakfast with, are capable of things that turn your blood to ice. Fred Brown was a good, decent man. He didn't deserve to be a statistic in a police file. He deserved a long life. But he fell prey to the one thing that ruins more lives than anything else: the bottomless, insatiable hunger of greed. I tell you, it never ceases to amaze me what a person will do when they think they can get away with it. But in the end, the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how many years you try to bury it in the dirt. Is there a specific aspect of the investigation or the psychological profile of Patricia Brown that you would like me to delve into further? Or shall we reflect on the nature of how greed can poison the closest of human bonds? Mysteries can be solved with a simple conversation, a willingness to forgive, and perhaps a warm cup of tea to wash away the worries of the day. With wedding bells on the horizon, life never looked better for the lovely Southern belle, Shirley Pierce. She was a woman whose presence brought sunlight into any room she entered. She was profoundly pleasant, wonderfully outgoing, and simply beautiful inside and out. Shirley was, by all accounts, a genuinely good, all-around person who uplifted her entire community. After years of focusing on her career and family, she had finally found the true love of her life, and her heart overflowed with happiness. She and her dear fiancé, Chuck Reeves, planned to live a long, beautiful, and deeply fulfilling life together. Nestled gracefully between Charlotte and Greensboro, the fast-growing city of Kannapolis, North Carolina, was renowned for its rich history in textiles. Kannapolis was a thriving, blossoming town. There were many different vibrant businesses coming in and out, creating a tapestry of opportunity. It was a remarkably quiet, family-based community where upper-middle-class homes sat gracefully within eyeshot of each other. It was a kind of neighborhood where neighbors still baked pies for one another, and doors were always open for a friendly chat. Shirley was a ray of sunshine in a region famously known for its southern hospitality. Born and raised in the neighboring town of Mooresville, North Carolina, she maintained incredibly close bonds with her family. She adored her sisters and her brother, and they cherished her right back. Everyone loved Shirley. She was a deeply friendly woman, respected and well-liked in her community, as well as at her bustling workplace. In the year 1970, Shirley had married Randall Pierce. The couple soon welcomed a beautiful daughter named Tracy. Tracy was Shirley's only child, and Shirley absolutely adored her. When Shirley and her husband amicably parted ways in the year 1981, Shirley looked for a steadfast way to support herself and her precious daughter. She eventually signed on with the Tuscarora Yarn Factory. Tuscarora Yarns was a prestigious textile company that crafted specialty yarns for high-end garments. Shirley started in the accounting department, and through sheer diligence and a remarkable attitude, she earned a promotion to become the administrative assistant to the chief executive officer. Shirley was a dainty, impeccably dressed, and highly articulate lady. She conducted herself with the utmost professionalism. Her colleagues adored her. One co-worker often remarked that they spent most of the day working harmoniously together, taking lovely lunch breaks, and occasionally enjoying evening shopping trips or delightful dinners. Shirley worked long, dedicated hours, but she always found time to organize charity golf tournaments and beautiful gala dinners to raise funds for individuals recovering from traumatic injuries. This boundless generosity spoke volumes about her expansive, caring heart. When Tracy grew up and welcomed a little boy of her own, becoming a grandmother sent Shirley entirely over the moon. The little boy was the absolute apple of her eye. She spoke of him constantly, her face lighting up with a radiant, proud grandmotherly glow. By the year 2013, with her family thriving and her career flourishing, Shirley was looking to hit the absolute trifecta of happiness in her romantic life. When she began dating a charming and kind textile salesman named Chuck Reeves, it appeared she had done exactly that. Chuck had known Shirley for quite some time through their mutual connections at Tuscarora Yarns. Their professional acquaintance slowly blossomed into a gentle, respectful courtship. Their relationship came a bit later in life, but was built on a foundation of profound mutual respect and genuine laughter. Chuck loved Shirley with all his heart, and Shirley loved him deeply in return. After dating happily for 4.5 years, Chuck decided it was time to make their bond permanent. In the blooming spring of the year 2013, Chuck proposed to Shirley in a wildly romantic setting. She accepted with tears of joy in her eyes. The future was impossibly bright. Chapter 2, The Great Misunderstanding. Like any compelling story, there must be a touch of mystery and a dash of dramatic irony to make the happy moments shine even brighter. While Shirley was busy planning her dream wedding, a rather humorous misunderstanding was brewing across town, involving the chief financial officer of Tuscarora Yarns, Mr. Irvin Johnson, and his highly spirited wife, Mrs. Marlene Johnson. Marlene was a woman of immense elegance. Born into a prosperous family in Gastonia, North Carolina, she was accustomed to the finer things in life. She dressed the nines, spoke eloquently, and maintained an impeccably organized household. However, Marlene possessed an incredibly vivid imagination, which sometimes ran entirely away with her. She had a tendency to read far too deeply into innocent situations, constructing elaborate, spy novel scenarios in her mind. Irvin, on the other hand, was a quiet, reserved man who simply went to work, did his accounting, and came home to read the evening newspaper. When Irvin began his role as the chief financial officer, Marlene took a keen, albeit slightly overwhelming, interest in his daily routines. She noticed that Irvin spoke very highly of the brilliant administrative assistant at his office, Shirley Pierce. When Irvin formally introduced his wife to Shirley at a company gathering, Shirley, being the warm Southern lady she was, gently touched Irvin's arm while offering a polite compliment about his tie, and called him honey, a standard, harmless endearment in the South. Marlene's overactive imagination immediately sounded a comical alarm. She dialed right into the entirely false narrative that there was some grand, secret romance occurring between the quiet accountant and the cheerful administrative assistant over the next several months. Marlene's fixation on this imaginary plot became the stuff of local legend. She even went so far as to hire a private investigator to trail them, fully expecting to uncover secret rendezvous. The private investigator, a sensible individual, followed Irvin and Shirley for an entire month. The thrilling espionage yielded nothing but reports of Shirley stopping at the local market to buy extra tomatoes for a casserole, and Irvin parallel parking his sedan with extreme caution. There was absolutely no proof of any wrongdoing, because there was no wrongdoing to be found. Yet Marlene, driven by her stubborn pride and a touch of theatrical flair, refused to accept the mundane truth. She convinced herself that Shirley was simply a mastermind of evasion. Shirley, meanwhile, knew perfectly well that Marlene was prone to these wild flights of fancy. Shirley never felt scared or intimidated, because she knew she was living an honest, beautiful life. She simply found the whole situation to be rather amusing, assuming that eventually Marlene would tire of her imaginary detective game. Chapter 3. The Cake Incident. The climax of Marlene's imaginary espionage occurred on a sunny Friday afternoon in the year 2011. It was a day that the employees of Tuscarora Yarns would fondly recall for years, usually followed by peals of warm laughter. Irvin, Shirley, and several other co-workers were enjoying their traditional Friday lunch at a cheerful local diner. The mood was light, the sweet tea was flowing, and the conversation was delightfully mundane. Suddenly, the diner doors swung open. In stepped Marlene Johnson, dressed in an elaborate disguise consisting of a dark trench coat, oversized sunglasses, and a wide-brimmed sun hat. Looking less like a stealthy spy and more like a glamorous movie star trying to avoid the paparazzi. In her hands, she carried a massive, intricately decorated 3-tiered chocolate cake. Marlene had actually spent the entire previous evening reflecting on her actions. After reading a self-help book on trust and communication, she had finally realized how entirely ridiculous her suspicions had been. She had baked the spectacular cake as a grand, theatrical gesture of apology. However, her nervous energy got the better of her. As she attempted to sneak up to the table to present the cake as a surprise, her heel caught on the edge of the dining room rug. Marlene stumbled forward like a startled gazelle. The giant chocolate cake launched from her hands, soaring through the air in a magnificent, slow-motion arc. Shirley, possessing the quick reflexes of a seasoned grandmother, leapt from her seat. She reached out, catching Marlene by the arm just in time to prevent her from tumbling to the floor. The cake, however, was not so fortunate. It landed squarely on the center of the table, exploding in a spectacular fountain of chocolate frosting and vanilla cream. The entire diner fell absolutely silent. Marlene stood there, her sunglasses knocked askew, her trench coat splattered with chocolate. She looked at Shirley, her eyes welling with embarrassing tears. "I am so entirely sorry," Marlene blurted out, her dramatic facade completely crumbling. "I thought you were stealing my husband, and instead, I have ruined your Friday lunch. I have been so incredibly foolish." Shirley looked at the ruined table, looked at Marlene's chocolate cover hat, and let out a bright, ringing laugh. It was a laugh so full of genuine joy and forgiveness that it instantly broke the tension. "Oh, Marlene, honey," Shirley chuckled, reaching out to gently wipe a dollop of frosting from the other woman's nose. "The only thing I want to steal is your recipe for this buttercream. It smells absolutely divine." The entire Tuscarora group erupted into laughter. Irvin rushed over to help his wife, offering her a napkin and a reassuring hug. That afternoon, instead of a dramatic confrontation, the group ordered extra coffee, grabbed a multitude of spoons, and happily ate the ruined chocolate cake right off the table. From that day forward, Marlene Johnson retired her private investigators and her wild suspicions. She and Shirley found common ground in their shared love of baking and gardening. The dark cloud of jealousy was entirely swept away, replaced by a delightfully quirky, supportive friendship. Chapter 4, A Tuesday Morning Surprise. By July 23rd, 2013, the dramatic rumors of the past had long faded into happy memories. It was a calm, lovely Tuesday morning. Chuck Reeves had returned from a weekend sales trip. He had spoken to his beloved Shirley the night prior at 8:15 in the evening. She had been happily dog-sitting his golden retriever, and they had made joyful plans for him to come over the next morning for a hearty breakfast. During their phone call the previous night, the line had suddenly gone dead. Chuck had not been alarmed in the slightest, as the cellular telephone service in that specific area of Kannapolis was famously spotty. He had simply smiled, whispered a good night to the disconnected line, and went to sleep, eager to see her the next day. When Chuck arrived at Shirley's house the next morning at 9:40, the garage door was open and the front door was locked. He retrieved a spare key from a decorative flower pot just to the left of the doorway and let himself inside. "Shirley, my love, I brought bagels," Chuck called out playfully. The house was quiet, save for the sound of running water coming from the master bathroom. As Chuck walked down the hallway, he noticed a very strong scent of lavender and concentrated floor cleaner. Then his eyes widened in sudden theatrical panic. Trailing across the pristine hallway carpet were large, dramatic splashes of bright red liquid. There was a dusting of white powder scattered near the doorway. Chuck's heart skipped a beat. His mind, heavily influenced by the mystery novels he loved to read on his business trips, immediately jumped to the wildest possible conclusion. He rushed into the bathroom. There, in the large garden tub, lay Shirley. She was motionless. The water was running, and the red liquid seemed to be everywhere. "Shirley," Chuck cried out, fumbling wildly for his cellular telephone to call emergency services. He dialed the number with shaking hands, frantically telling the operator that he had found a terrible scene. Within minutes, the local paramedics arrived, rushing into the house with their emergency kits ready. They hurried into the bathroom, prepared for the worst. Suddenly, Shirley sat up in the bathtub, letting out a startled shriek. She wiped a thick layer of green, mineral-rich mud mass from her eyes, looking at the paramedics and her terrified fiancé in utter bewilderment. "Chuck Reeves, what on earth is going on?" she demanded, grabbing a large, fluffy towel to wrap around her shoulders. The paramedics blinked. The lead medic looked at the red liquid splattered across the floor, then leaned down and sniffed it. He dipped a gloved finger into the spill and rubbed it together. "Mr. Reeves," the paramedic said, a slow, highly amused smile spreading across his face, "I believe your fiancée is completely unharmed, and she seems to have spilled a very large bottle of cherry pomegranate bath oil." Chuck stood frozen, staring at the spilled bath oil, the scattered white bath salts he had mistaken for mysterious powder, and the intensive lavender cleaning solution Shirley had used earlier that morning. Shirley began to laugh heartily. "Oh, Chuck, I dropped the bath oil and was too relaxed with my mud mask to clean it up right away. Did you honestly call the emergency services over spa day?" Chuck's face turned as bright red as the pomegranate oil. The paramedics chuckled, helping him up from where he had slumped against the doorframe in relief. It was a morning that would go down in local history, a story Chuck would be forced to retell at every dinner party for the rest of his life, much to Shirley's endless amusement. Chapter 5, The Prescott Connection. While Shirley and Chuck were enjoying their wonderfully dramatic, completely harmless lives in North Carolina, another story of youthful misadventures and valuable life lessons was unfolding across the country, set in the breathtaking landscapes of Prescott, Arizona. The Prescott National Forest provided the local residents with endless recreational activities. It was a place of soaring pines, crisp mountain air, and boundless freedom. People loved to ride their bicycles there, go camping under the starlit canopy, and host lively, joyful gatherings. In the late summer of the year 1988, a bright, deeply popular 19-year-old named Pamela Pitts, known affectionately as Pam to everyone, was figuring out her path in the world. Pam was a truly wonderful young woman. She was constantly doing something creative, always eager to have wholesome fun, and possessed a rare, beautiful ability to make friends with absolutely anyone she met. As the oldest of 4 siblings, she was a fantastic big sister and a natural, loving mentor. By the age of 19, Pam was ready to spread her wings. She decided to move into a cozy, albeit slightly disorganized apartment with her new friend, 18-year-old Shelley Norgard. Shelley was a quiet, sometimes awkward girl who had faced a few familial struggles growing up. Living with Pam was a brilliant opportunity for Shelley to experience the warmth and cheerful chaos of a loving friendship. However, moving in together proved to be a humorous lesson in responsibility for both young women. They quickly discovered that balancing the rent, paying for groceries, and deciding whose turn it was to wash the dishes could create quite a bit of comedic tension. Pam had recently started a job at a vibrant local restaurant, while she dreamed of eventually attending a prestigious beauty college to study fashion design. Shelley was also working hard, trying to maintain her share of the household. But by September, the stress of early adulthood began to cause minor, silly squabbles between the 2 roommates. "Shelley, you cannot leave your art supplies on the kitchen counter. I am trying to make a sandwich," Pam would declare, tossing a paintbrush back into its jar. "And you cannot use my special shampoo, Pam. It costs a fortune," Shelley would counter, though they usually ended up laughing over a shared pizza a few hours later. In August of that year, Pam beautifully reconnected with a charming young man named Bobby Kitchener. They took their renewed romance wonderfully slow, enjoying long walks downtown and hanging out with friends near the historic Courthouse Plaza, watching the world gently cruise by. Then, on the evening of September 16th, 1988, Pam seemingly vanished. Shelley called Pam's father, Paul, a very kind and protective man. "Mr. Pitts, I'm not entirely sure where Pam is. She did not come home last night," Shelley admitted, sounding genuinely puzzled. At first, Paul was not terribly concerned. Pam was an independent 19-year-old with a flair for spontaneity. But when she failed to show up for her shift at the restaurant on Monday, Paul decided to file a routine missing persons report with the Prescott Police Department, just to be safe. Chapter 6, The Rumor Mill. In a small town, a missing teenager is like a spark in dry brush. Almost immediately, the local rumor mill began churning out the most incredibly wild, outlandish theories. Because Pam was known to occasionally attend weekend bonfires at a popular forest hangout, known to the locals as Gordo's Pit, the teenagers at the local high school began to spin elaborate, spooky campfire tales. "I heard there was a secret club out there," one student whispered dramatically during lunch. "I heard someone threw a mannequin into the fire and performed a theatrical play," another added, eyes wide with imagined excitement. The rumors became so incredibly elaborate that the local authorities actually drove out to Gordo's Pit to ensure the youths were not causing any environmental mischief. All they found was a pile of forgotten camping supplies, a melted plastic lawn chair, and absolutely no evidence of anything sinister. Meanwhile, investigators diligently checked in with Pam's inner circle. They spoke with her boyfriend, Bobby Kitchener, who politely explained that he had left Pam with some friends at the Courthouse Plaza before heading to his evening job. They spoke with Shelley, who was anxiously awaiting her roommate's return so they could figure out how to pay the impending electric bill. They even interviewed an 18-year-old girl named Melinda Perry, after hearing a silly rumor that she and Pam had argued over spilled soda at a party. Melinda, completely bewildered, confirmed she had not even been at the party, as she had been busy helping her mother organize a charity bake sale at the local motel. Just as the town was reaching a fever pitch of ridiculous speculation, the truth arrived in the most wonderfully anticlimactic manner possible. 13 days after she was reported missing, a bright yellow station wagon pulled into Paul Pitt's driveway. The passenger door opened, and out stepped Pam, looking incredibly relaxed, deeply tanned, and holding a massive souvenir cup from a famous roadside diner. She had not been abducted. She had not been the victim of any nefarious plot. She had simply become entirely overwhelmed by the stress of paying rent, her arguments with Shelley, and her indecision about beauty college. On a whim, she had accepted an invitation from a group of artistic friends to drive to a creative retreat in the mountains of neighboring Nevada. In the days before cellular telephones were common, she had simply forgotten to call her father, assuming Shelley would tell him she was taking a short vacation. Paul rushed out and wrapped his daughter in a massive, tearful hug. "Pamela Pitts, you have caused half the town to think you were spirited away by a secret society." Paul scolded, though he was laughing with pure relief. Pam looked completely shocked. "A secret society? Dad? I was learning how to make ceramic pottery in Nevada. I am so incredibly sorry I did not call." Chapter 7. Growing Up and Moving On. The Great Prescott Panic of 1988 evaporated into thin air, leaving the town with a humorous reminder not to believe every wild rumor spun by imaginative teenagers. Pam returned to her apartment, where she and Shelley had a long, very mature conversation over a pot of herbal tea. They realized that living together was putting too much strain on their friendship. They gracefully agreed to end their lease early. Pam moved back home to save money for beauty college, and Shelley found a smaller, more manageable studio apartment. Their friendship, freed from the stress of shared utility bills, blossomed into a lifelong, beautiful bond. A few years later, in the spring of 1991, another pivotal, yet entirely positive, transition occurred in Shelley's life. Shelley had been steadily dating a wonderful, highly responsible young man named Ray Clerks. Ray was an intelligent 24-year-old with a deep, abiding passion for aviation. His ultimate dream was to become a commercial airline pilot. One beautifully clear evening in May, Shelley and Ray drove out to a quiet spot near the mountains to go stargazing. They laid a soft blanket across the hood of Ray's car, looking up at the glittering expanse of the cosmos. "Shelley, I have something monumental to tell you," Ray said softly, pointing toward a distant, bright star. "I have been accepted into a highly prestigious flight academy, but it means I have to move to California next week." Shelley's heart felt a momentary ping of sadness. She cared for Ray deeply, and the thought of him leaving was difficult. But she looked at his shining eyes and saw how incredibly important this dream was to him. Instead of being angry or feeling abandoned, Shelley smiled warmly and squeezed his hand. "Ray, that is absolutely brilliant news. You're going to be the most magnificent pilot in the sky. I am so incredibly proud of you." They spent the rest of the evening making joyous plans for the future. Ray promised to fly back and visit her, and Shelley promised to send him care packages filled with his favorite baked goods. When Ray officially moved to California a few days later, his family hosted a massive, joyful farewell party. Even the local investigators, who had grown fond of the young folks in town after the great missing person mix-up of 1988, stopped by to wish Ray the best of luck in his high-flying career. There were no tragedies hidden in the desert. There were no dark secrets buried in mine shafts. There were only young adults learning, growing, making honest mistakes, and supporting one another as they navigated the beautiful complexities of life. Chapter 8. The Tapestry Time. Years rolled gently by, weaving the lives of these wonderful individuals into a rich, beautiful tapestry of success, love, and continuous personal growth. In North Carolina, Shirley and Chuck Reeves were married in a breathtaking, sunlit ceremony surrounded by their enormous, loving family. The reception was a magnificent affair featuring a massive, 5-tiered chocolate cake baked personally by their dear friend Marlene Johnson. Marlene had discovered a true passion for culinary arts and had opened a wildly successful local bakery. entirely channeling her vibrant energy into creating masterpieces of sugar and flour. Her husband, Irvin, managed the bakery's finances, and they lived a remarkably happy, deeply contented life. Whenever Chuck told the famous story of the terrible bathroom spa day incident, Shirley would simply roll her eyes with profound affection, cut him an extra slice of cake, and remind everyone that a good lavender cleanser and a vivid imagination were a highly dangerous combination. Meanwhile, out in the sunny expanses of Arizona, Pam Pitts achieved her ultimate dream. She graduated at the absolute top of her class from beauty college and eventually opened her own highly successful fashion and design studio. She remained an incredibly bright, optimistic light in her community, mentoring young women and teaching them the value of creativity and self-reliance. Her father, Paul, could not have been prouder of the remarkable woman she had become. Shelley Norgard channeled her incredible organizational skills into a thriving career as an event planner. She helped orchestrate beautiful weddings, joyful reunions, and massive community festivals. She remained best friends with Pam, and they often laughed heartily over a cup of coffee about their early, chaotic days as mismatched roommates. And high above the clouds, Captain Ray Clerks lived out his destiny, flying commercial airliners across the globe. He often looked out of the cockpit window at the brilliant stars, fondly remembering the supportive friends in Prescott who had cheered him on when his journey first began. Life, with all its humorous misunderstandings, occasional anxieties, and beautiful resolutions, proved to be an incredibly wonderful adventure. The people of Kannapolis and Prescott showed that with clear communication, a willingness to forgive, and a hearty sense of humor, any dramatic mystery could be transformed into a story of enduring love and profound, lasting joy. With wedding bells on the horizon, life never looked better for the lovely Southern belle named Shirley. She was incredibly pleasant, famously outgoing, and possessed a radiant spirit that lifted everyone around her. She was simply beautiful, a genuinely wonderful person in every respect. She had finally found the true love of her life, a charming gentleman named Chuck, and her heart was completely full of joy. They planned to live a beautiful, peaceful life together, surrounded by friends, family, and endless happiness. But when a shocking, seemingly brutal mishap is discovered, the grand plans of their bright weekend are temporarily thrown into hilarious chaos. The local emergency services received an overly dramatic call that Tuesday morning. It is kind of a shocker when you hear a citizen call in and say they think a terrible crime has occurred, only to realize the victim is entirely made of sugar and flour. The city of Kannapolis, North Carolina, nestled comfortably between larger bustling cities, is renowned for its wonderful textiles and tightly knit community. Kannapolis is a growing town, filled with a lot of different friendly businesses coming in and out. It is a quiet, family-based community where upper-middle-class homes sit within a friendly eyeshot of each other. It is not the kind of neighborhood you would expect to find any sort of wild scandal. On July 23rd, 2013, at 9:40 in the morning, a panic call upended the otherwise calm Tuesday. The caller, 59-year-old Chuck Reeves, is in dire need of help, not for his fiancée, 62-year-old Shirley Pierce, but for her prized creation. He had arrived at her home and seen bright red frosting and what he thought was powdered sugar across the floor. He followed the trail into the bathroom and found a magnificent, multi-tiered red velvet wedding cake, completely destroyed in the bathtub, with the water running over its beautiful floral decorations. Chuck reported that the cake was motionless, which is typical for baked goods, but there was red food coloring everywhere. The cake was ruined. He realized that the masterpiece was already gone. There was nothing he could do to save the delicate buttercream. When the local neighborhood watch and amateur event planners arrive, they are immediately led to the main bedroom. The house is just a really quiet, nice house. It was an eerie feeling to walk in and smell a strong odor of lemon-scented kitchen cleaner. The trail of red frosting continued across the floor. It appeared that the scene was hastily attempted to be cleaned up with the lemon spray, which created some very shiny patterns in the carpet and back into the bathroom. Once in the bathroom, they are met with a ferocious scene of culinary destruction. The amateur planners could tell that the cake was attacked with a very dull butter knife. It had multiple clumsy slices taken out of its top tier. It was clearly no accidental drop. It was a deliberate cake sabotage, with a messy scene in the early stages of processing. The event planners turned to their only witness, Shirley's sweet boyfriend, Chuck Reeves. Chuck's demeanor was devastated. He had been looking forward to tasting that cake. However, he was very cooperative, and he was very articulate. What the town learned about Shirley Pierce was that she appeared to be just a good, decent, hard-working person. There did not appear to be any reason to determine who would want to do something like this to her lovely baking project. Born and raised in a neighboring cheerful town, Shirley was a ray of sunshine in a region known for its warm hospitality. She was very close to her family, her lovely sisters, and her dear brother. Everybody loved Shirley. She was a very friendly woman, well-liked in her community, as well as at her job. For many years, Shirley had looked for a wonderful way to support herself and eventually signed on with the Tuscarora Yarns Company. Tuscarora Yarns was a textile company that made beautiful specialty yarns. Shirley was a very dainty, well-dressed, very well-spoken lady who served as the chief executive officer's administrative assistant. She worked long hours and worked hard at the cheerful company. Shirley put what free time she did have to good use, organizing fun golf tournaments and gala dinners for several local charities. She had a very big heart. When her wonderful daughter Tracy became a mother to a little boy, being a grandmother sent Shirley completely over the moon. Her grandson was the absolute apple of her eye. By 2013, with her family growing and her career flourishing, Shirley was looking to hit the absolute jackpot in her romantic life. When she began dating the charming textile salesman Chuck Reeves, it appeared she had done just that. Chuck loved her, and Shirley loved him. The pair dated for 4.5 years, but kept separate cozy residences. In the bright spring of 2013, Chuck proposed to Shirley, and she happily accepted. Despite the vicious frosting scene, the cake saboteur took great care to hide their identity. The neighborhood watch noticed the cleaning stains on the carpet. It is well known that strong soap destroys all traces of sticky fingerprints. The culprit went to a lot of trouble to try to destroy the baking evidence. The intensity of the clumsy slicing suggests to the gossip columnist that this was a deeply personal attack on the wedding preparations. There did not appear to be any forced entry. It was almost over the top, which did not match up to somebody randomly breaking into a house just to eat some frosting. Chuck had spoken to Shirley by telephone the night prior, around 8:15 in the evening. She was going to dog sit for him while he traveled out of town for his fun sales job. Chuck said that in the middle of the call, the telephone suddenly went dead. In that specific area of Kannapolis, telephone service is notoriously spotty, so he was not alarmed. But when he arrived at Shirley's house the next morning to pick up his happy dog, he found the garage door open and the front door locked. He retrieved a spare key from a flower bed and let himself in, only to find a ruined dessert. The planners initially side-eyed Chuck, but he showed them his hands, and he did not have a single trace of red food coloring or butter on his fingers. His alibi held up perfectly. He was out of town selling yarn. When Shirley's daughter Tracy arrived, she was distraught to find the wedding centerpiece ruined. Tracy suggested they look into an old rival baker named Richard, who, 10 years ago, had threatened to ruin Shirley's recipes. Richard had even threatened to poke her cupcakes with a screwdriver. But when they found Richard, he was managing a local pawn shop, moving very slowly due to a minor twisted ankle, and had absolutely no interest in baking anymore. He was completely cleared. Hours into the great cake investigation, a shocking telephone call changed everything. The call came from Irvin Johnson, the chief financial officer at the yarn company. Irvin was highly agitated. He believed his own wife, Marlene Johnson, was the one responsible because for years, Marlene seemed to be intensely jealous of Shirley's flawless event planning skills. Marlene grew up in a wealthy family that owned several fancy restaurants. She was not used to not getting her way. She was always dressed elegantly and spoke very eloquently. Irvin and Marlene had a lovely marriage for over 2 decades, but recently, Marlene had developed an eccentric obsession. She falsely believed that Irvin preferred Shirley's party hosting skills over her own. Marlene was driven by a competitive ego. Irvin explained that Marlene had even gone so far as to hire private eyes to look at Shirley's grocery shopping list to steal her secret recipes. There was one famous incident at a local diner where Marlene, dressed in a dramatic disguise, completely lost her temper and started a hilarious, messy food fight with Shirley over who made the best pie, yelling that she would never let Shirley win the local bake-off. Shirley, being a peaceful lady, never pressed charges and just laughed it off. The town investigators found Marlene sitting in her car downtown. When they looked inside her vehicle, they found a massive supply of lemon cleaners and a receipt for a butter knife. Furthermore, when they looked at Marlene's hands, her perfect French manicure was slightly ruined, and her fingernails were stained with obvious bright red food coloring. Marlene had tried to get her friend, a motivational speaker named Tim Connor, to provide an alibi, claiming they were drinking tea all night. But Tim, feeling terribly guilty about the wasted red velvet cake, confessed that Marlene had asked him to lie. The truth was out. Marlene had sneaked into Shirley's house to steal a slice of the famous cake, panicked when it started to crumble, and in a hilarious attempt to hide her mistake, threw the entire thing into bathtub and sprayed it with cleaner. When confronted with the sticky red evidence on her hands, Marlene gasped and dramatically slumped into a chair. She confessed to her baking crimes. The town, rather than punishing her, decided that Marlene just needed an outlet for her energy. Shirley, showing her boundless grace, forgave Marlene instantly. They agreed that Marlene would channel her passion into opening her own cheerful bakery, and in return, Marlene had to bake 1,000 perfect cupcakes for Shirley and Chuck's rescheduled wedding. Love and sweet frosting conquered all jealousy. Meanwhile, just a few counties over in the beautiful, sunny region of Prescott, another humorous misunderstanding was brewing that would eventually cross paths with Kannapolis' wedding celebration. The Prescott National Forest provides residents with endless, wonderful recreational activities. People rode their bicycles out there and would go camping during the bright daytime. On the cheerful evening of September 29th, one local camper was just finishing packing up his tent. As he made his way back to his truck, he came across one of the area's many recreational fire pits. He saw a pile of discarded cardboard boxes that had been used for a bonfire. Sticking up out of the ashes was what looked like an arm. Panicked, he ran to the nearest general store to call the authorities, sparking the wildest rumor mill the small town had ever seen. Within minutes, the local deputies responded to the area outside of the city limits, known to locals as the pit, where they located the startling figure. But upon closer, much less frantic inspection, the town coroner started to laugh. It was not a person at all. It was a heavily melted, high-fashion plastic mannequin, dressed in completely charred, sparkling fabric. While the town breathed a massive sigh of relief, the mystery remained. Whose fashion project had been so dramatically discarded? The local authorities remembered that a young, bright 19-year-old fashion student named Pamela Pitts had been reported absent from her classes 13 days prior. Pam was a wonderful kid. She was always doing something creative, always wanted to have fun. She was the type of person who could make friends with absolutely anybody. She was incredibly artistic and dreamed of attending a famous beauty and design college. Pam was the oldest of 4 children and loved her family dearly. She was an awesome mentor to her siblings. By age 19, Pam was ready to explore the world and moved in with her quirky, well-meaning friend, Shelley Norgard. Shelley was slightly awkward and had a habit of exaggerating her stories, but she meant well. Pam's worried father, Paul, had reported her absent when she missed her shift at the local family restaurant. When the authorities told Paul about the melted mannequin in the woods, he was utterly bewildered. He explained that Pam and Shelley had been bickering lightly over who was supposed to pay the telephone bill, and Pam had mentioned she wanted to move back home to save money for fabric. When the town deputy sat down with Shelley, she spun a wild, winding tale about how she and Pam had argued over a sewing machine, and Shelley had gone to get milkshakes with her boyfriend, Ray Clerks. Ray, a highly responsible young man studying to be a commercial airplane pilot, could not remember exactly what time they got milkshakes, which only fueled the local gossip. The teenagers in town began spreading the most ridiculous, over-the-top rumors. Some claimed there was a secret, late-night fashion club that sacrificed ugly clothing in the woods. Others said Pam had gotten into a dramatic tug-of-war over a beautiful dress with a girl named Melinda Perry. The gossip got so out of hand that poor Melinda had to stand up at a town hall meeting and loudly declare she had absolutely nothing to do with the melted plastic statue. For months, the mystery of the missing fashion student and the burned mannequin became the town's favorite light-hearted puzzle. No one was truly frightened, because everyone knew Pam was likely just off on an adventure, but they loved the drama of it all. Then, suddenly, another missing persons report startled the community. Shelley's boyfriend, Ray, failed to show up for a family reunion in California. Ray's family was very alarmed because Ray was incredibly responsible and would never miss a party without sending a handwritten note. The town immediately pointed their fingers at Shelley, assuming her clumsy, dramatic nature had caused Ray to run away. Shelley, enjoying the dramatic attention, told a wild story about how Ray had decided to take their pet dogs and drive to a secret pilot training facility. The truth, as it always does in these sunny towns, eventually floated to the surface in the most wonderful way. On a bright spring morning, a large, colorful passenger van pulled into the center of Prescott. Out stepped Pam Pitts, looking more radiant and inspired than ever, carrying dozens of sketchbooks filled with beautiful dress designs. Right behind her was Ray Clerks, proudly wearing a brand-new, shiny pilot's uniform. The entire town gathered around in joyous disbelief. Pam enthusiastically explained that she had received a sudden, wonderful opportunity to attend a prestigious, intensive fashion retreat in a distant city. In her overwhelming excitement, she had forgotten to tell her roommate, Shelley, the mannequin in the woods, that was just a failed, extremely ugly avant-garde dress project that she had asked some teenagers to throw away for her, and they had decided to build a bonfire around it for fun. Ray laughed and explained he had simply been accepted into an accelerated, elite flight school earlier than expected. He had left Shelley a very detailed, loving note on the kitchen counter, but Shelley, being notoriously absent-minded, had accidentally thrown it away while cleaning. Shelley blushed bright red, apologizing profusely to the entire town for letting her imagination run so wild and causing such a silly uproar. With all the humorous misunderstandings finally cleared up, the two towns of Kannapolis and Prescott found themselves united by their silly, exaggerated local legends. Pam Pitts, having mastered the art of beautiful dressmaking during her secret retreat, was immediately hired by none other than Shirley Pierce to design the most magnificent, sparkling wedding gown anyone had ever seen. When the lovely, warm summer day of Shirley and Chuck's rescheduled wedding finally arrived, it was a spectacular, joyous event that brought everyone together. Irvin and his wife Marlene arrived early, proudly carrying 1,000 perfectly decorated, absolutely delicious red velvet cupcakes, safely guarded from any bathtubs or lemon cleaners. Pam Pitts danced the night away in a dress of her own joyful creation, surrounded by her loving family. Ray Clerks flew a wonderful banner high above the outdoor reception in his new airplane, showering the guests with soft, colorful flower petals. Even Shelley and the misunderstood Melinda became fast friends, laughing together over a shared plate of sweet treats. It was a beautiful reminder of both towns that while imaginations can easily run wild and small arguments can feel like grand mysteries, the truth is usually simple, safe, and waiting to be met with a bright smile. They learned the true value of clear communication, the hilarity of town gossip, and the absolute importance of community forgiveness. There was no darkness, no danger, only a collection of quirky, wonderful people navigating life's little bumps together, ending their grand story with sweet laughter, delicious food, and endless, beautiful love. With wedding bells on the horizon, life had never looked better for the beloved Southern Belle. Her name was Shirley Goodnight, and she was a ray of sunshine in a region known for its warm hospitality. She was so pleasant, so incredibly outgoing, and simply beautiful inside and out. To everyone in the fast-growing city of Kannapolis, North Carolina, Shirley was just a good, all-around wonderful person. Nestled quietly between the larger, bustling cities of Charlotte and Greensboro, Kannapolis was renowned for its textiles. It was a growing town, featuring a lot of different businesses coming in and out, yet it maintained the charm of a quiet, family-based community. The streets were lined with lovely upper-middle-class homes, where neighbors still waved from their front porches and kept an eye out for one another. It was a place of domestic bliss. Certainly not the kind of neighborhood where one would ever expect to encounter a dark mystery. Shirley had finally found the true love of her life, and she was overflowing with happiness. At 62 years old, she had weathered the storms of life and emerged with a smile. She and her fiancé, Chuck Reeves, a charming 59-year-old textile salesman, planned to live a beautiful, quiet life together. They spent their weekends enjoying the simple things, walking Chuck's dog, sharing hearty meals, and discussing their upcoming nuptials. Shirley was a woman of deep domestic pride. She had been married once before, in 1970, to a man named Randall Pierce. Together, they had welcomed a beautiful daughter named Tracy. Tracy was her only child, and Shirley simply adored her. When Shirley and her husband parted ways in 1981, Shirley looked for a reliable way to support herself and her daughter. She eventually signed on with the Tuscarora Yarn Factory. Tuscarora Yarns was a thriving textile company that manufactured specialty threads. The office dynamic was a blend of hard work and light-hearted situational humor. Shirley came in as the administrative assistant to the chief executive officer. She was a very dainty, flawlessly dressed, and eloquent lady. Her co-workers often marveled at her professionalism. She and her colleagues became fast friends. They spent their days managing the chaotic schedules of the executives, often sharing quiet laughs over the eccentricities of the textile industry. They went to lunch most every day, sharing stories and planning weekend shopping trips. Shirley worked long hours and dedicated herself to the company. Anyone in Kannapolis would have been incredibly grateful to have her on their team. Outside of the office, Shirley put her free time to excellent use. She was passionate about giving back, organizing golf tournaments and elegant gala dinners for several local charities. She was deeply involved in an organization that raised funds for individuals dealing with severe medical recoveries. This dedication spoke volumes about her character. Shirley had a massive heart, always looking out for the vulnerable. When Tracy grew up and had a little boy of her own, the joy of becoming a grandmother sent Shirley completely over the moon. The little boy was the absolute apple of her eye. Anybody who knew Shirley would inevitably hear endless, heartwarming stories about her grandson and her beloved daughter. By 2013, with her family growing and her career flourishing, Shirley was looking to complete the perfect picture in her romantic life. She had known Chuck for quite a while through the textile business. Their professional interactions slowly blossomed into a sweet, late-in-life romance. They got along marvelously. Chuck loved her deeply, and Shirley loved him right back. The pair dated for 4.5 years, enjoying their courtship while maintaining their separate cozy homes. In the spring, Chuck finally proposed, and Shirley happily accepted. Everything was perfectly in place, but the universe often has a peculiar way of testing the strength of a community. Chapter 2: The Unthinkable Morning. On the 23rd of July, 2013, a strange anomaly disrupted the calm Tuesday morning. At 40 minutes past 9, Chuck Reeves dialed the emergency assistance line. He was standing inside Shirley's home, and he was in desperate need of help. The previous evening, Chuck had spoken to Shirley on the telephone at 15 minutes past 8. She had agreed to look after his dog while he traveled out of town for his demanding sales job. They had a lovely conversation, but right in the middle of it, the line suddenly went dead. Chuck was not overly alarmed. In that specific area of Kannapolis, telephone service could be notoriously spotty, a quirk of the neighborhood that usually provided more comedic frustration than actual worry. However, when he arrived at her lovely house the next morning, things felt distinctly out of place. The garage door was wide open, yet the front door was securely locked. This was highly unusual for the organized and predictable Shirley. Chuck retrieved a spare key hidden safely in a flower bed vase to the left of the doorway and let himself inside. The house was completely quiet. It was a beautifully decorated home, but an eerie silence hung in the air. As he walked further inside, he noticed a strong, sharp odor of household cleaning bleach. He moved toward the bathroom and found a heartbreaking scene. Shirley had passed away. The exact details of her passing were deeply tragic, leaving Chuck absolutely devastated. He realized immediately that she was gone, and there was nothing he could do to bring his beautiful bride to be back. When the local county police arrived, they found Chuck waiting, his demeanor completely shattered. The investigators, led by a seasoned and compassionate detective, noted the peculiar nature of the home. There was no sign of a typical burglary. Nothing had been ransacked, and no valuables were missing. Instead, there were strange, patchy bleach stains across the carpet, a clear sign that someone had attempted to clean up the area. The detectives knew they were dealing with a deeply personal mystery. They needed to understand who would ever wish harm upon a woman as universally loved as Shirley Pierce. Chapter 3: A Web of Jealousy. The detectives started their diligent work by speaking with Chuck. Despite his heartbreak, he was very cooperative and incredibly articulate. He provided excellent information. The detectives respectfully examined him and confirmed his alibi with his employer in South Carolina. Chuck was entirely cleared, leaving the detectives to search elsewhere. When Shirley's daughter, Tracy, arrived, the emotional weight of the loss was palpable. Tracy and Shirley were best friends, and Shirley had always been Tracy's unwavering support system. Through her grief, Tracy tried to help the authorities. She recalled a troubling chapter from her mother's past. 10 years prior, Shirley had briefly dated a man named Richard who had been unkind to her. Shirley had bravely secured a restraining order, and Richard had moved away. The detectives quickly located Richard working at a local pawn shop just 15 minutes away. Richard was shocked to hear the sad news. However, he was older now, struggling with severe health problems, and could barely walk. It became immediately clear that Richard was physically incapable of being involved in the tragic event. Just as the detectives were running out of leads, a highly unexpected telephone call changed the entire trajectory of the investigation. The call came from Irvin Johnson, the chief financial officer at Tuscarora Yarns. Irvin was a quiet, reserved man, but on this day, he was highly agitated. Irvin revealed a shocking suspicion. He believed his own wife, Marlene Johnson, was involved in Shirley's tragic fate. Marlene was a woman of intense drama. Born into a wealthy family in Gastonia, North Carolina, she was accustomed to always getting her way. She was exceptionally well-dressed, always groomed to perfection, and carried herself with an intimidating presence. She and Irvin had married in 1983. For over 2 decades, they had lived a comfortable life, raising one daughter. But Irvin explained that in 2003, Marlene experienced a severe emotional crisis. After that, her personality shifted dramatically. She became highly erratic, intensely possessive, and overwhelmingly jealous. She began to imagine that Irvin was being unfaithful to her, targeting any single woman who happened to work in his office. When Irvin took the position at Tuscarora Yarns in 2006, he introduced Marlene to his colleagues, including Shirley. Shirley, being the gracious Southern lady she was, smiled warmly and lightly touched Irvin on the arm during a polite greeting. In that innocent moment, Marlene's irrational jealousy flared into a blazing fire. For years, Marlene became completely fixated on Shirley. She even went so far as to hire a private investigator to monitor them. The investigator surveyed Irvin for an entire month and found absolutely no proof of any wrongdoing. Shirley and Irvin were nothing more than friendly colleagues, but the lack of evidence only fueled Marlene's paranoia. She hired another firm that used remote-controlled aerial devices to take photographs of Shirley's home. She memorized Shirley's grocery shopping schedule and her commute times. Shirley, possessing a heart full of grace, simply assumed nothing would ever come of the bizarre behavior. She knew she was doing absolutely nothing wrong. But one Friday afternoon in 2011, the situational comedy of office life turned into a dramatic spectacle. Shirley and her friends from the yarn factory were enjoying their regular Friday lunch at a local diner. Suddenly, Marlene arrived, dressed head to toe in dark athletic clothing, wearing a large hat, and hiding her face behind a laminated diner menu. The waitress, who knew the factory group well, immediately spotted the disguise. She rushed over to warn the table. The factory workers panicked, attempting to form a protective human shield around Shirley to escort her to her car. But Marlene was remarkably fast. She sprinted across the parking lot and engaged in a completely unexpected, chaotic physical altercation with Shirley, shouting wild and unfounded accusations. Shirley, ever the peacemaker, refused to press formal charges. She simply filed a restraining order, hoping the drama would finally cease. She did not want to cause trouble for Irvin at the office. Irvin himself was so distressed by his wife's actions that he moved out of their shared home. Chapter for the truth revealed. Armed with this dramatic history, the detectives knew exactly where to look. They obtained a search warrant and quickly located Marlene sitting in her car outside an attorney office. Inside the trunk of her vehicle, they found a vast collection of household cleaning supplies, perfectly matching the bleach found at Shirley's beautiful home. When they searched Marlene's residence, the depth of her fixation became undeniable. They found aerial maps of Shirley's neighborhood and countless surveillance photographs. It was a tragic portrait of a mind consumed by baseless jealousy. Marlene refused to speak with the detectives, sitting quietly in the interview room, wearing dark sunglasses, feigning complete boredom. But science and careful police work spoke for her. Genetic evidence recovered from the scene definitively linked Marlene to the location. Furthermore, her attempts to secure a false alibi from a friend named Tim completely unraveled when Tim admitted the truth to the authorities. In January of 2018, Marlene faced a jury. Despite her elegant appearance in the courtroom, the overwhelming evidence brought the truth to the light. On the 24th of January, the jury delivered a swift verdict of guilty. Justice was finally served. While the community of Kannapolis mourned the loss of their beloved Shirley, they found immense comfort in the fact that truth had prevailed. Shirley's family lost a wonderful mother and grandmother, and Chuck lost his sweet fiancée. But her spirit of generosity, her infectious laughter, and her deep love for her family continued to inspire everyone who had the privilege of knowing her. She was a beautiful reminder to cherish every moment and to always treat others with kindness. Book To the Shadows of the Forest. Chapter 5, The Restless Youth of Prescott. Far across the country, in the scenic expanses of Arizona, the Prescott National Forest provided local residents with endless opportunities for outdoor recreation. Families spent their weekends riding bicycles along the trails, and groups of friends gathered under the vast, starry skies to enjoy the beauty of nature. In the late summer of 1988, the town of Prescott was bustling with the vibrant energy of youth. Among the lively crowd was 19-year-old Pamela Pitts. Pam was a wonderful, spirited young woman, known throughout town for her incredibly bright smile and her absolute zest for life. She was the kind of person who could make friends with absolutely anyone she met. She was outgoing, deeply artistic, and excited about the endless possibilities the future held. As the oldest of 4 siblings, Pam was deeply devoted to her family. She was an amazing big sister, always offering guidance and a supportive shoulder to lean on. Her father, Paul, cherished her deeply. She was a mentor to her younger siblings, leading them through life with grace and a wonderful sense of humor. Like many teenagers, Pam was trying to figure out her exact path. She dreamed of attending beauty college, or perhaps venturing into the world of fashion design, to gain her independence. She decided to move out of her family home and share an apartment with a new friend named Shelley Norgard. Shelley was an 18-year-old girl with a remarkably different background. While Pam came from a warm, loving household, Shelley had experienced a difficult upbringing. Her parents had separated, and her father was known to be a very stern taskmaster. Shelley carried a heavy fear of abandonment and made it abundantly clear that she desperately wanted to avoid moving back into her father's strict house. Living with Pam offered Shelley a much-needed sense of family connection. To support herself, Pam took a job at a busy local restaurant. The two roommates settled into their shared life, navigating the common, humorous hurdles of domestic independence, arguing playfully over unwashed dishes and the monthly rent payments. In August, Pam happily reconnected with an old romantic interest, a polite young man named Bobby Kitchener. They took their renewed courtship slowly, spending lovely evenings sitting by the courthouse square, watching the town go by, and sharing their dreams of the future. But the light-hearted domestic adventure took a deeply concerning turn as autumn approached. The dynamic between Pam and Shelley began to fracture. The stress of unpaid bills and Shelley's unpredictable, dramatic personality began to wear on Pam. Pam confided in her father, Paul, expressing her desire to move back into the comforting embrace of her family home. Paul was thrilled and welcomed her with open arms. Knowing that Shelley had a reputation around town for telling tall tales and being somewhat untrustworthy, Pam planned to break the news to Shelley, but before she could finalize her transition back home, a profound mystery unfolded. Chapter 6: The Disappearance. On the 16th of September, 1988, Pam simply vanished. The first sign of trouble came when Shelley called Paul, casually asking if he knew where his daughter was. She claimed Pam had not come home the previous night. Initially, Paul thought perhaps Pam was simply staying with friends. But when Monday arrived and Pam failed to show up for her restaurant shift, Paul knew in his heart that something was fundamentally wrong. Pam was far too responsible to abandon her job without notice. He immediately contacted the local police department. The authorities began a diligent search. They soon discovered a highly suspicious detail that Shelley had conveniently failed to mention to Paul. Pam's vehicle was parked safely at their apartment, and all of her personal belongings, including her purse, were still inside the home. It was incredibly unlikely that Pam would leave voluntarily without her essential items. 13 days later, the search came to a tragic conclusion. A local resident walking through a popular recreational area known as the Forest Pit discovered that Pam had passed away. The community was entirely heartbroken, and the local sheriff office immediately joined forces with the city police to find answers. They began by interviewing the people closest to Pam. Shelley was brought in for a gentle but thorough conversation. She wove a complex story about her whereabouts on the night Pam disappeared, claiming she had driven around town with her boyfriend, Ray Clerks, visiting friends, and watching movies until the early hours of the morning. The detectives then spoke with Bobby, Pam's boyfriend. Bobby was completely transparent. He explained that he and Pam had spent the early evening together downtown before he left for his evening work shift at 9:30. Pam had told him she planned to spend a quiet evening at home. Bobby's employer easily verified his timeline, firmly clearing the young man of any involvement. When the detectives checked Shelley's timeline with her boyfriend Ray, cracks began to form in the narrative. Ray could not confidently verify Shelley's late-night activities, stating he was simply too tired to remember the exact details of a night that had occurred weeks prior. Further interviews with Shelley's friends revealed a concerning pattern of behavior. Friends reported that on the night Pam went missing, Shelley was incredibly angry. She had been wandering around the local gatherings, blaming Pam for every inconvenience in her life. Most alarmingly, Shelley had a strange, dramatic habit of boasting about her theories on how to effectively hide things from the authorities, claiming she knew the perfect ways to make problems disappear. Despite these highly suspicious rumors, the detectives lacked the concrete physical evidence required to move forward. The town rumor mill spun out of control, with wild stories of secret societies and elaborate forest gatherings. But none of these sensational tales held any truth. The case slowly grew cold, leaving Pam's family waiting patiently for justice. Chapter 7, The Second Shadow. Time passed, but the determined detectives never truly let the case fade from their minds. They reviewed old files and followed every faint lead, hoping for a breakthrough. 3 years later, in the spring of 1991, another completely unexpected event shook the region. A group of college students exploring a deep, vertical mine shaft in the desert made a startling discovery. The authorities were called, and they recovered the remains of a young man who had clearly met a tragic end. Through careful dental record comparisons, the medical examiner identified the young man. It was Ray Clerks, Shelley's former boyfriend. Ray's family had reported him missing just weeks prior. He was a highly responsible young man studying to become a commercial airline pilot. He had been scheduled to attend a family wedding in California, and when he failed to arrive, his family knew something was terribly wrong. The connection was impossible to ignore. 2 people closely associated with Shelley had now met tragic fates shortly after deciding to distance themselves from her. Ray had been planning to move back to California to pursue his aviation dreams, and he had intended to leave Shelley behind. Shelley, terrified of abandonment, had reacted with absolute fury. Armed with this new, undeniable pattern, the detective secured a warrant to search the vehicle Shelley owned. Inside the trunk, they found vital physical evidence that directly linked her to the disappearance of Ray. On the 4th of June, 1991, Shelley was placed under arrest. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, she eventually accepted a plea agreement. She confessed to the authorities, admitting that during a heated argument about their future and the ownership of their shared pets, she had caused Ray's passing. She was sentenced to 20 years in the state correctional facility. Pam's family heard the news with a mixture of relief and renewed frustration. They were thankful that Shelley could no longer cause harm, but they desperately wanted her to answer for what had happened to Pam. They believed with all their hearts that Shelley had hurt Pam out of jealousy and fear, perhaps worrying that Pam would reveal her secrets. But without direct evidence linking Shelley to the forest pit, the authorities were legally unable to bring charges for Pam's case. 18 long years passed. The world changed, technology advanced, and seasons turned, but the love Paul held for his daughter remained as steadfast as ever. He waited patiently, trusting that the universe would eventually balance the scales of justice. Chapter 8, The Power of Patience. In March of 2011, 23 years after Pam disappeared, a specialized team of cold case detectives reopened the investigation. A brilliant detective, unaware at first of the full history regarding Ray, began to piece the puzzle together with fresh eyes. When he realized that Shelley was already serving time for a remarkably similar offense, the pieces finally clicked into place. The detectives knew they had to act strategically. Shelley was scheduled to be released from a correctional facility in just a few months. The detective visited her, engaging in a polite conversation, gently reminding her that the police had never forgotten about Pamela Pitts. After the visit, the facility recorded all of Shelley's outgoing telephone calls. The detectives listened to 97 separate conversations, hoping for a slip of the tongue. Shelley was careful, and soon she was released. She moved to a new town, found employment, married a new partner, and assumed a quiet life under the name Shelley Harmon. But the detectives refused to quit. 6 years after her release, in the spring of 2017, the dedicated detective decided to listen to those 97 recorded calls one more time. This time, with the benefit of intense focus, he caught a subtle, chilling exchange between Shelley and her father. During a discussion about the police visit, her father expressed deep concern. Shelley, in a moment of frustration, quietly admitted to her father that she had been harboring a dark secret about that night for decades. The line went dead silent. That small recorded admission, combined with a massive mountain of circumstantial evidence gathered over 30 years, was finally enough. On the 2nd of June, 2017, the detective knocked on Shelley's door and officially arrested her for the tragedy that befell Pam. The trial presented a monumental challenge. 3 decades had passed, and many original witnesses were no longer available or could no longer recall the fine details of their youth. Recognizing the inherent risks of a trial, the prosecutors approached Pam's family with a difficult decision. They could proceed with a highly risky trial, or they could accept a plea agreement that would guarantee a formal conviction on the record. Paul, choosing certainty over vengeance, agreed to the plea. On the 1st of March, 2021, Shelley stood before a judge and finally confessed. She admitted that she had sought out Pam at the gathering, intending to argue. The argument escalated, and Shelley admitted she had caused Pam to pass away. Because Shelley received credit for the 20 years she had already served and the time spent awaiting trial, she was allowed to walk free. It was not the absolute perfect ending the family had dreamed of, but it was an undeniable victory for truth. The world finally knew the reality of what had happened. Justice, though significantly delayed, had made its final ruling. The story of Pam and Ray transitioned from a local mystery into a powerful testament to the enduring love of families and the unwavering dedication of those who seek the truth. Ray was remembered as a brilliant young man with a passion for skies, a deeply loved son who dreamed of soaring above the clouds. Pam was forever remembered as the bright, artistic fireball of energy who cherished her family above all else. Though their time was cut entirely too short, the light they brought into the world continued to shine brightly in the hearts of everyone they touched, inspiring their community to live every day with purpose, joy, and boundless love. Nestled comfortably between the bustling streets of Charlotte and the historic charm of Greensboro, the fast-growing city of Kannapolis, North Carolina, was a place renowned for its rich history in textiles. It was a town where the hum of the looms had long been the heartbeat of the community. Here, life moved at a steady, reassuring pace. Neighbors knew each other by name. Upper-middle-class homes sat within friendly eyeshot of one another, and the air always seemed to carry the sweet scent of blooming magnolias and fresh pine. It was a quiet, family-based community where folks believed in the power of a warm smile and a helping hand. In the center of this pleasant community lived a woman who embodied the very spirit of Southern hospitality. Her name was Shirley Goodnight Pierce. Born and raised in nearby Mooresville, Shirley was a true ray of sunshine. At 62 years old, she possessed an elegance and grace that seemed to light up every room she entered. She was beautiful, not just in her perfectly styled hair and dainty, professional wardrobe, but in the boundless kindness of her heart. Shirley was a woman of multitudes. She was a devoted mother, a doting grandmother, a loyal friend, and a powerhouse in the professional world. In 1970, she had married and soon welcomed her only child, a daughter named Tracy. Shirley adored Tracy with every fiber of her being. When life shifted and her marriage ended in 1981, Shirley did not falter. She sought a new path to support herself and her beloved daughter, eventually finding her professional home at Tuscarora Yarns. Tuscarora Yarns was a specialty textile company, a cornerstone of local industry. Shirley began her journey there as the administrative assistant to the owner and chief executive officer. It was a role that required impeccable organization, endless patience, and a touch of diplomatic genius. Shirley had it all. With a polite smile and a perfectly brewed cup of tea, she managed the bustling office with effortless charm. Her co-workers loved her dearly. She and her friends in the accounting department spent their days working hard, and their evenings enjoying light-hearted dinners and shopping trips. She was the kind of person who made the workplace feel like a second family. But Shirley's heart extended far beyond the office walls. In her free time, she tirelessly organized charity golf tournaments and gala dinners, raising significant funds for people with traumatic brain injuries. It spoke volumes about her character. She had a massive heart, always looking out for those who needed a little extra support. And when Tracy welcomed a little boy into the world, Shirley found her greatest joy. Her grandson became the absolute apple of her eye. Anyone who knew Shirley knew all about her brilliant daughter and her perfect grandson, because she simply could not help but share her pride with the world. Chapter 2A, Second Chance at Love. By the time 2013 arrived, Shirley was experiencing a beautiful renaissance in her life. Her career was flourishing, her family was thriving, and she was about to hit the ultimate jackpot in her romantic life. Love, as it often does, arrived when she least expected it, proving that the heart never really stops blooming. Enter Chuck Reeves. Chuck was a 59-year-old textile salesman, a man who shared Shirley's appreciation for the industry and the local community. They had known each other casually for quite some time, crossing paths in the bustling corridors of Tuscarora Yarns. What started as professional pleasantries eventually blossomed into a deep, genuine friendship, and then slowly and wonderfully into love. Their relationship was a testament to the beauty of finding a soulmate later in life. There was no teenage drama, only the comforting certainty of two people who knew exactly who they were and what they wanted. They laughed together, shared quiet evenings, and celebrated the simple joys of life. Chuck was absolutely enamored with Shirley, and Shirley loved him right back. After dating happily for 4.5 years, Chuck decided it was time to make things official. In the bright spring of 2013, he asked Shirley to marry him. With joyful tears in her eyes, she accepted. The wedding bells were on the horizon. Shirley had finally found the true love of her life. They began planning a peaceful, joyous future together, combining their lives while maintaining the charming independence they had both worked so hard to build. Life, it seemed, had never looked better. Chapter 3, The Shadow in the Background. However, every bright light inevitably casts a shadow. For Shirley, that shadow came from an entirely unexpected and baffling source. It involved the chief financial officer of Tuscarora Yarns, a quiet and reserved man named Irvin Johnson, and his wife Marlene. Marlene was a woman of refined outward appearances. At 61 years old, she came from a wealthy background in Gastonia. She was always dressed to the nines, exceptionally well-groomed, and maintained a commanding, almost intimidating presence. While Irvin was the sort of man who spoke only when spoken to and generally followed the flow of the room, Marlene was fiercely accustomed to getting her way. For over 2 decades, Irvin and Marlene had shared a prosperous life. But around 2003, a profound shift occurred in Marlene's worldview. She began to struggle with a deep, consuming paranoia. Her once confident demeanor warped into erratic suspicion, particularly regarding her husband. When Irvin took the position at Tuscarora Yarns in 2006, he introduced Marlene to his colleagues, including the universally beloved Shirley. Being the gracious Southern lady she was, Shirley greeted Irvin with her standard warmth, perhaps offering a polite touch on the arm and a cheerful greeting. For Marlene, this simple act of kindness was misconstrued as a massive threat. Despite Shirley being perfectly happy in her own life, Marlene developed a baseless and all-consuming obsession with her. It became a quiet, bizarre spectacle. Marlene hired private investigators, spending vast amounts of money and effort to monitor Shirley's completely mundane daily routine. She wanted proof of a rivalry that simply did not exist. The private detectives returned with nothing but reports of Shirley going to the grocery store. Word took off are sitting on the kitchen table. But her personal cell phones? They were found in the office, wiped clean to their factory settings hours apart from each other. Now, think about that. Who resets 2 different phones hours apart? If an intruder did it, why take the time? If Melissa did it, why leave her car, her keys, her money, and her daughter behind? Mark, the husband, tells police she ran away because of financial stress and suspended security clearances. Her own family, the Mondragons, believe something far worse happened inside that house. They point to a suspicious blood like stain near a fish tank. They look at the husband's quick dismissal of tips about a woman matching her description scene, struggling near a blue Dodge truck on Highway 518. The police search with drones and dogs, but the high desert landscape keeps its secrets. Is Melissa a woman who chose to walk away from her life? Or is she buried somewhere in the dry earth? I tell you, the worst part of this job is not the bodies. It is the silence. It is the empty chairs at the dinner table. It is the wives, the daughters, and the parents who have to live every single day with a question mark hanging over their heads. The people who did these things think they got away with it. They think the passage of time makes them safe. But they are wrong. Because as long as there is breath in the loved ones left behind, and as long as there is a detective willing to look at an old cardboard box of evidence, the hunt is never over. We do not stop. We never stop, because the dead deserve a voice, and I intend to be that voice. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, and sometimes they do things that simply defy any logical explanation. I spent 3 decades looking into the dark corners of the human soul, staring at the monsters who walk among us, and if there is one thing I have learned, it is this. The truth has a habit of making people very uncomfortable. Let us take a walk through some cases that will make you wonder about the people living right next. Door to you. We start in the quiet, sun-drenched town of Gilbert, Arizona. Usually, it is a place of desert landscapes and growing families. But underneath that calm exterior, there is a haunting story about a man named Nick Cordova. He was a devoted father and a passionate business owner. On a fateful Wednesday in May 2020, his life was abruptly and violently extinguished. 6 years have passed since that afternoon, and for his wife, Alicia Cordova, the agony is still as fresh as if it happened 10 minutes ago. It is a story that forces us to look at the fragility of security, the complexity of human betrayal, and the frustrating silence of those who should be speaking. The events of May 27, 2020, began like any other normal day. At approximately 5:30 in the evening, Alicia was in her kitchen when her 5-year-old daughter, Capri, rushed in with absolute terror in her eyes. The children had been on a video call with their father, 40-year-old Nick, who was at his place of business, a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning company called Gilbert Air. Suddenly, the children heard a startling noise, and then their father stopped responding. What Alicia saw and heard through that screen became a lifelong trauma, starting a desperate, 6-year battle to find the truth behind her husband's murder. When the police were called to the offices located at 511 West Guadalupe Road, they walked into a scene that made no sense. According to official reports, the first officer on the scene saw a man peeking through the office blinds. This individual identified himself as Dave Sweetman, Nick's business partner. When command had come out, Dave emerged, handing the officer a bloodied 9mm handgun. He claimed it was his, and said that 2 men had entered the building, attacked him, and fled. Inside, the tragic reality was confirmed. Nick Cordova lay unresponsive, a victim of a lethal gunshot wound. Now, as an investigator, you learn to look at the details. You listen to what people say, and then you look at what they do. The investigation that followed had some very unsettling questions. Surveillance footage captured 2 masked individuals entering the building and identified there. Escape vehicle, a vintage 2-tone red and silver Ford F-150. But the broader circumstances were shrouded in doubt. The police initially detained Dave Sweetman. He told investigators that he had been forced to give the intruders all the money from his pocket. But when the officers searched him, they discovered over $1,000 in cash still on his person. You have to be kidding me. Despite these discrepancies and the documented tension between the partners regarding company finances, law enforcement eventually stated they no longer considered Dave a suspect in the shooting itself. But for the family, skepticism remained deep. Nick Cordova believed in the American dream. He was raised by a single mother, grew up with a strong sense of responsibility. And when he entered into a 50-50 ownership stake at Gilbert Air in 2018, he thought it was the culmination of his hard work. But the partnership with Dave Sweetman went bad. Alicia recalls that in the months leading up to the tragedy, Nick became increasingly paranoid. He felt he was being watched. He worried that his partner was making questionable financial moves. And then came the most chilling revelation. Nick told his wife that Dave had pressured him into taking out mutual life insurance policies. Nick worried aloud that his partner might value him more dead than alive. Well, now, in my line of work, when a man tells you he thinks someone wants him dead for insurance money, you tend to believe him. For Alicia, the aftermath has been a grueling journey through a legal and investigative labyrinth. She had to navigate insurance claims involving policies that totaled $8 million, and she faced redacted police files and shifting detective assignments. The Gilbert Police Department says the investigation is active, but for those who love Nick, the lack of transparency is a heavy burden. When Alicia was finally allowed to view the surveillance footage, it only made her more suspicious. She saw details that seemed to contradict the initial story told by those on the scene. The reward for information has been increased to $20,000. The family is still waiting for the truth. A truth they believe is buried under hundreds of pages of withheld information and the silence of people who know exactly what happened. But you see, the story of the Sweetman name does not start or end with a business partnership gone wrong. Sometimes the shadows stretch much further back. Let us look at another mystery in the very same town of Gilbert, Arizona, involving the untimely passing of a woman named Laura Sweetman. In the winter of 2013, this brilliant pediatric neurologist, a cherished member of the Phoenix Children's Hospital medical community, was found unresponsive in her home. For 13 years, those who love her have carried the weight of her death, navigating the silence of a case that was officially ruled inactive mere months after she died. When Laura Sweetman was discovered on the morning of December 9th, 2013, her life was a complicated mix of professional success and personal struggle. Friends and colleagues knew her as a woman dedicated to her 3 sons and her patients, despite the weight of an abusive marriage. Earlier that year, in April, a domestic violence incident had prompted Laura to seek an order of protection against her husband, David Sweetman. She documented his attempts to hold her against her will and his erratic behavior. For months, Laura lived in a state of high anxiety, telling those close to her that she was being followed and that her safety was in jeopardy. The scene at her home on that December morning presented investigators with perplexing contradictions. A displaced gate at the base of the staircase and an unlocked back door suggested the safety of her home had been breached. The autopsy report, performed by a medical examiner whose career would later be ruined by serious allegations of professional misconduct, concluded with an undetermined cause and manner of death. The report noted superficial physical trauma, but failed to link it to her passing. There were conflicting medical notes about a previous heart attack that left no actual physical damage to her heart tissue, and prescription medication was found at the scene that was completely absent from her toxicology. Results. I tell you, when the medical examiner's work is sloppy, the truth gets buried deeper than the victim. The investigation seemed to falter right from the beginning. Key leads, like a neighbor's report of a suspicious vehicle parked in her driveway weeks before her death, were never pursued with vigor. The people in her social circle, including men she had been dating and communicating with, were not questioned deeply enough to rule out other theories. It is a frustrating reality when systemic issues within the Maricopa County Medical Examiners Office cast doubt on the integrity of the whole process. But Laura's family and friends refuse to let her be forgotten. They are still pushing for a modern, transparent review because no one's life should be reduced to an undetermined report. Let us travel further north, to a corner of Wisconsin where a haunting narrative has hung over the community for nearly 6 decades. This is the story of Stephanie Casper, It began in the summer of 1969, a time when the world felt both wide open and incredibly fragile. Stephanie was on the cusp of her 18th birthday, bright, hard-working, and full of quiet dreams. She was balancing a part-time job at a downtown Milwaukee restaurant called Mark's Big Boy while navigating young love and her desire for independence. On Wednesday afternoon, July 9, 1969, the sky over Racine County was heavy with drizzle. A local family went down to the banks of the Root River near an old condemned steel trestle bridge on 8 Mile Road. There, they made a discovery that shattered the peace of the entire community. What looked like an unnatural pile of debris near the water's edge was actually the remains of a teenage girl. When investigators processed the scene, the gravity of the crime was undeniable. The remains had been treated with a chilling level of deliberation. Parts of the young girl were wrapped in pages of the Milwaukee Sentinel, dated June 24th, and scattered along the riverbank. The medical examiner determined that the dismemberment happened after she died, performed with methodical, almost surgical precision. It suggested someone who had both the time and the technical skill to do it. Stephanie was identified by her father, Charles Casper, who had been about to file a missing persons report after she failed to return home from her shift at the restaurant. As detectives dug into her life, they found a girl who was deeply loved, but there were secrets. Stephanie was secretly dating a 22-year-old serviceman named John. In the late 1960s, this was a relationship she felt she had to hide from her parents. The timeline of her disappearance was agonizingly short. The last confirmed sighting of Stephanie was at 12:30 in the morning on Sunday, when she walked out of Mark's Big Boy carrying her brown leather purse. Her boyfriend, John, was supposed to pick her up, but he fell asleep. She was left to face the night alone. The investigation expanded when residents in the nearby city of Franklin turned over discarded items, including a gold clutch, an appointment book, and personal photographs, abandoned by someone moving between Milwaukee and Racine. These items, along with remains found weeks later in a cardboard box near a farmhouse, suggested the killer knew the rural backroads of the area and could move with purpose and secrecy. Over the years, the case became a graveyard for leads. Detectives looked at the restaurant staff, including a manager who acted with suspicious eagerness and a cook named Michael Bartelt, who gave inconsistent details about the night Stephanie vanished. In 1988, a new lead emerged when a family member stepped forward with allegations against Michael Bartelt. But the forensic technology of the time could not bridge the gap between suspicion and certainty. With the evolution of DNA technology, investigators tried again. They tested evidence recovered from the scene, including pubic hairs found on a towel and samples from a military jacket. But the profiles were too degraded for a definitive match. Suspects, including the Bartelt brothers and a convicted offender named Wilbert Mackey, were investigated and eventually excluded. But the search for answers continues. The Racine County Sheriff's Office remains committed to finding the truth that has eluded them for 57 years, ensuring that Stephanie is remembered as a life lost, not just a cold case file. Now, let us turn to the rugged, high-desert landscape of Taos, New Mexico, where we find a mystery that challenges our understanding of truth, family, and the choices people make. This is the story of Melissa Casillas. On the afternoon of Thursday, June 26, 2025, the life of 18-year-old Sierra Casillas changed forever. She was working at a local coffee shop when her father, Mark, called her. His voice carried a tension that meant something was wrong. He had just heard from his wife's supervisor at Los Alamos National Laboratory. Melissa had not shown up for her shift. Mark and Melissa commuted together every single day because they shared a car. Mark worked as a superintendent, and Melissa was an administrative assistant. But Sierra knew something her father did not. She knew her mother had driven back home after dropping Mark off that morning, claiming she forgot her security badge and might work remotely. Sierra had seen her mother shortly before 1 o'clock, when Melissa stopped by the shop to drop off. Lunch. Sierra felt her mother was just having a complicated day. But when Sierra tried to reach her mother, the silence was deafening. The message bubbles stayed green, showing they were not delivered. The location-sharing app showed nothing. Sierra left work early and drove home. The family's white Jetta sat in the driveway. The dogs were outside, quiet and subdued. Inside the house, everything looked interrupted. Melissa's work phone, her badge, her keys, and her sentimental gold chain were waiting on the kitchen table. In the loft, a paycheck remained unclaimed. But the real panic set in when Sierra found 2 personal cell phones in the office. Both had been restored to factory settings, their histories wiped clean. When she tried to access the cloud data, she found the security credentials had been changed. The home was locked, the car was there, but Melissa was gone. The New Mexico State Police started an investigation. 2 distinct stories emerged. The Casillas family believed Melissa was a woman overwhelmed by professional pressures and financial debt, including garnished wages and suspended security clearances. They thought she might have chosen to step off the map to escape her crumbling world. On the other side, Melissa's own family, the Mondragons, saw a devoted mother who would never leave her daughter without a word. They looked at the reset phones, the lack of a note, and the tension in the marriage, and they saw something far more sinister. The investigation was plagued by fragmented leads. A tip from an acquaintance named Lloyd placed a woman matching Melissa's description near highway 518, looking like she was struggling with a mysterious blue Dodge truck nearby. Mark dismissed this tip quickly, pointing out details that did not match. Some saw this as a husband who knew his wife, while others saw it as an attempt to steer the police away. Later, surveillance footage from July showed a woman believed to be Melissa walking briskly and alone with a backpack along that same highway. It supported the theory of a voluntary departure. But the mystery of the 2 cell phones remains. They were wiped at separate times, hours apart. Would a third party do that? Or does it suggest a deliberate, methodical process carried out by Melissa herself to leave no digital breadcrumbs? There has been no banking activity, no passport applications, and no activity on her social security number. Search efforts using drones, helicopters, and dogs have found nothing. A blood-like stain was found near a fish tank in the home, which remains a point of argument. But without physical evidence, the state police cannot rule out foul play, nor can they confirm a voluntary disappearance. In the end, you are left with the harsh reality of the human condition, a person in distress, a family under pressure, and the desperate choices made when there seems to be nowhere left to turn. We track almost everything in this digital age, but we are still powerless against the profound human choice to disappear. My. The truth is out there, somewhere in the silence, waiting for someone to finally speak up. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine. Money, love, fear, a parking space. I spent 3 decades looking at the worst of humanity, staring into the cold eyes of killers who thought they were clever. Let me tell you something. They never are. They always leave a trail, and their greed or their panic always catches up to them. Today, we're going to look at some cases that have left deep, painful scars on the communities they touched. We're going to walk through the shadows, dissect the logic, and look at the evidence. Because the dead cannot speak for themselves, and it is our job to be their voice. Let's start our journey in Arizona, in a place called Gilbert. Sun-drenched, quiet, residential. The kind of place where people move to raise their